he said, there is a time for peace and there is a time for war, and now it was the preacher, Emerson, that stood there, a black robe regiment, from his pulpit and preached to several hundred one Sunday morning when he took off the black robe that signified that he was a preacher. And he said, there is a time for peace and there is a time for war, and now it is time for war. And so today I stand with the black robe regiment, and I am one preacher declaring to patriots, it is time for war. Let us stop the steal.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Hope you're having a good holiday. I've been working on a series or an expose trying to explain what happened leading up to and on January 6th. And so what I did here was put together a bit about the 5th and a bit about the 6th. And pretty much everybody that you see in this video, other than, you know, the attack, these are religious leaders. These are faith leaders. These are people that are actually rallying up this patriotic fervor in the name of Jesus. And so I put this together because I wanted you guys to see how reality versus the messaging is actually happening, some of which is in real time. If you like what we do here, please subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell, like the video, leave some comments. Please consider sharing this with your friends and family so that we can wake everybody up and get back to being America. Love you guys, and please enjoy the video.
The mainstream media now is basically calling anybody who associated with them a radical. Given what happened on January 6th, I guess you were, of course, there for a bit. What's your take on what really happened?
Sure. Well, I was there on the 5th and organized a rally where we led prayer. Multiple pastors prayed, and we're praying for the city, for the future of America, preached the gospel, had thousands of people respond. So the 5th was like revival for us, for what I do, right?
And I'm telling you, the early revolution didn't just start in the bars. It didn't just start in the Boston harbors. It was sparked in the pulpits of America. There were a group of preachers called the Black Robe Regiment that started this nation. It's time for God to raise up a brand new generation of black robe preachers that love Jesus, that love the Word of God, but love America and love freedom. Amen? So I received my responsibility. And I will never wear a yellow robe. I will only wear the black robe. And now as a minister, I lead sheep, I feed sheep, and I kill wolves.
Hello, fellow deplorables! We have a nation at risk, and it's time for a revolution. Are you guys ready? Are you guys ready? Are you ready to start a revolution? You see, because our founding fathers, when they signed the Declaration of Independence that day, they weren't just signing a document. They were signing a death warrant. Because they knew when they signed that document that not only them, but their families were at risk for death. Are you guys willing to fight for this nation?
What's up, Patriots? How you doing? We're Bikers for Trump, and we exist for the sole purpose of seeing Donald Trump elected in 2020. We got his back, and we got your back. Folks, we're on the brink of socialism, which is the Venus flytrap for any democracy, for which it stands. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if any of those things ring true to you, then you better step up right now, because we're on the brink of a revolution. And I, for one, will take the first bullet. If there's anybody out there from Antifa or Black Lives Matters, spin your first fucking bullet in my chest, okay? And I, for one, will stand up. And again, Antifa, if you're out here and you're hiding, Black Lives Matters, if you're hiding, start with me, Chris Cox, Bikers for Trump. Thanks, everybody. Hats off. Donald Trump, 2020.
The enemy to destroy this beautiful and great land that our forefathers gave to us. We will rise up in this time and say, like Paul Revere, the leftists are coming. The leftists are coming. The leftists are coming. God bless you, and God bless America.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Bible declares that the thief and the enemy has come but to kill, to steal, and to destroy. For the last 40 years, the liberals have tried to kill our unborn babies, steal elections, and destroy the Constitution. But patriots have come to Washington, D.C. to make their voices heard that we will not allow them to steal this election. And now it is time for war. And so today I stand with the Black Robe Regiment, and I have one preacher declaring to patriots, it is time for war. Let us stop the steal.
And then the 6th rolls around. So we think the 6th is going to be a normal day.
Ahead of January 6th, some supporters called for violence.
The president said nothing violent, incited no violence. I heard the whole speech. As a matter of fact, it was a typical Trump speech. I wanted to hear something, we were looking for something, not something, radical, but some sort of plan. What's up?
We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Some hear his words as a call to action.
You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Invade the Capitol building.
Do the right thing.
Take the Capitol. Take the Capitol.
Been lawfully slated.
Take the Capitol right now.
So then they say, let's walk to the Capitol. Now, what I saw up there, a lot of the people, I'll use a line from the left, they were mostly peaceful, right? It was a mostly peaceful protest. It's the only place I've ever been before. Earlier, you're walking through 1 million people. Somebody steps on your toes. They apologize to you. Please excuse me. Forgive me. I mean, and that's been the nature of that movement from day one.
You know the kind of people that we were with. The nicest, friendliest, happiest people. It was like a family reunion out there. It was incredible. It was wonderful.
Who street? Our street. 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 We're gonna storm the fucking Capitol. Fuck you, fuckers.
When I got there, I was outside the Capitol building, and it was very peaceful.
Yeah.
And the people could see people on the building, and the people in the outside of the building were shouting at them, calling them traitors. They were actually very unhappy with those individuals.
DC is a motherfucking war zone. It's fucking war. Forward.
Police retreat to the Capitol building, where it's becoming more threatening.
They're going to tell you what, when you see them all tattooed and all paramilitary, you're going to find out they're on the left-wing payroll.
Yeah, I feel like the tone was peaceful, and I feel like there's a total media spin that's trying to take everyone associated that like President Trump, that are still committed to the Constitution in a strong way and still have traditional American values, and label them now as terrorists.
We have a good group. We got about 30, 40 of us. We're sticking together and sticking to the plan. Y'all, we're 1 block away from the Capitol now. I'm probably going to go silent when I get there because I'm going to be a little busy.
And in addition to this, the media is essentially calling them terrorists.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden this happens. And it reminded me of Moscow in 1917 with the Bolsheviks, where there were rabble-rousers who dressed up in the opposition's clothing and had a violent event in the streets. And we saw what happened to Russia.
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
And that's what they did.
Proud Boys.
And I guarantee where there's escalation, you've got Antifa, because I want these guys arrested. I pray to God they arrest them because they never do.
Proud Boys. Where's Antifa?
But there are moments that suggest another motive.
Take the fucking Capitol. Come on, tighten up. Come on, boys. Let's not fucking yell that. All right?
And I heard, I don't know how many actually went inside, but it was a small amount. And then I know President Trump quickly condemned it. I think he sent 3 tweets out. 2 of them were censored and taken down. And then if you watch what he told the Americans to do was to calm down and go home, right? Calm down, stop this action, and go home.
As this is happening and as thousands more swell outside, Trump composes a tweet, not to calm his supporters, but to blame his vice president. He writes, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution.
Anyway, this is not a protest. This is a rally that we had to call a protest in order to meet. And the people are not violent.
I need a command official from Capitol so we can coordinate where they want us to pull back to. We cannot hold this without more munitions or more manpower.
It's left wing. It's not pro-life Catholics and nuns.
This wasn't the Trump crowd. This didn't look anything like the Trump crowd or the prayer warriors.
I need to know from Capitol wherever they want to pull back to.
Then the police lose the line.
There's a picture, we've lost the line. We've lost the line. All MPD, pull back.
There may be some broken down windows. Yeah, there may be some activity, Charlie Kirk's reporting. But I'm telling you, it's not our group. It's not our people. It's not this crowd.
1033, I repeat, 1033, west part of the Capitol. We have been pranked and we've lost the line.
On the 1033, have all units respond to assist them. Do what we're trained to do.
Get out of here! Take your big sorry asses and back up in there! Run your sorry asses off!
The mob heaves in a coordinated scrum.
And so what you have is you have a peaceful showing up, and so this, if this is going to go the way the news media manipulates it, you need to hear from me.
They are tased, gassed, and robbed of their equipment. They're beaten with a crutch, a hockey stick, and even an American flag. At least 4 officers are pulled into the crowd. One dragged by his own helmet, face down. And again, the frenzy turns fatal.
This is a peaceful gathering of frustrated citizens who are watching their president get ripped off, and they see more clearly than the left-wing media knuckleheads the economy going down, the race battles intensifying because there's money in division.
Roseanne Boyland, a Trump supporter who has been swept up by QAnon conspiracies, is moving toward the door. But amid the scrum, she collapses and is lying unconscious beneath the mob. As the crowd sarcastically chants a Black Lives Matter slogan, Boylan's friend, Justin Winchell, tries to pull her to safety. He screams for help. But instead, fellow rioters trample over Boyland and charge at the police again. Boyland will be pronounced dead at a local hospital in the evening. The president tweets again. He repeats that the election had been stripped away, calls his supporters great patriots, and says, remember this day forever.
Don't think for a minute that these were nasty, naughty, ridiculous, hillbilly Trump people. That is not what you saw today. These were paid rabble rousers.
Dude, hey, you can't touch us. We are one of you. We are one of you. Come on, Americans.
Just as elsewhere, this crowd is a mix of die-hard Trump supporters, but also more organized groups like the Oath Keepers, who move in formation here toward that east side entrance. The Oath Keepers and their supporters continue to update each other on the Zello chat app.
The House is in recess. We're going to yank them out of their seats.
So maybe maybe the populist movement is arising out of those that actually see reality and see the world the way it is. Remember, 1/3 of the revolution was fought by patriots who cared about freedom. That's what created America.
The group enters the Capitol together. Proud Boys are near them, including Joe Biggs, the organizer we saw earlier.
Took over the Capitol, overran the Capitol. We're in the fucking Capitol, bro. Here we go, Nancy. Are you in Nancy?
Huddled together under a table, Pelosi's staff record what's happening.
We need Capitol Police, I think, coming to the hallway. They're pounding on doors trying to find her. Yeah.
Please be advised there are masks under your seats. Please grab a mask, place it in your lap, and be prepared to don your mask in the event that you get a breach.
Just outside, a mob of 100 or more is baying to get into them.
Well, we came this far. What do you say? Drag them out!
And now they want to finish the job. And they want the coup to be done today on January 6th, so they can seal the deal with Joe Biden as the next president of the United States. Today was the day to have the coup, to put it all in process and have it come to the head. That's what this was. This is a coup.
Going. Yeah, I would just stop, bro.
And in moments are pushing against the doors into the House. On the other side, Capitol Police erect a barricade and draw their guns.
You're a traitor.
On the floor, lawmakers are evacuated to the rear of the chamber, where in a few minutes a rioter will be shot and killed. Part of the mob outside now peels off in that direction to find a different way in.
No, people are running that way.
Ashley Babbitt, an Air Force veteran and QAnon supporter, is among the first to arrive at the rear of the House. They see the lawmakers escaping. That lobby might have been clear had the House been evacuated sooner, but the rioters now become incensed. Zachary Allen, a Trump supporter from Pennsylvania, punches in the glass panels with his bare fists. Police are stretched extremely thin. Just 3 officers and a security staffer stand guard. None are wearing riot gear, and they keep their weapons holstered.
Going back and exposing the forensic crime scene data that shows, oh my gosh, maybe the FBI and maybe the Democratic Party and maybe political operatives in D.C. were working together to create a narrative that would shut down the certification resistance movement in its tracks and turn over power to the machine that took the election by force.
When a team of heavily armed police now arrives, the 3 officers step aside.
Go! Let's go! Get this shit!
This creates a crucial gap that allows rioters to smash in the glass. A warning, what happens next is graphic. It's 2:44 p.m. and behind the door, a police officer draws his handgun.
There's a gun! There's a gun! Hey, he's got a gun! He's got a gun!
Babbitt vaults into the window, and the officer shoots her once.
Oh! Oh!
It's inflicts a fatal wound through the upper chest.
Everybody stay down. Get down.
Yeah. The fuck?
Take your pins off.
Pins on.
The Bible says that the shepherd David was on the backside of a Judean hill tending the flock when a lion and a bear came to steal the little lambs. Why did God put David there? He put him there to stop the steal. The Bible declares that it was David that defeated the lion and the bear. Unfortunately, today, we don't fight lions and bears. We fight liberals and rhinos. And let me speak to right side broadcasting to every cowardly congressman or limp-wristed, weak-kneed, sissified senator like Ben Sass and little Mitt Romney and son of a Mitch McConnell. We say, you cowardly congressmen and sissified senators better stand up tomorrow like shepherds and stop the steal.
And so what you have is you have a peaceful showing up, and so this, if this is going to go the way that
I hit the button to unmute, but it didn't work. Damn it. I was doing so well. I had everything ready. What up, tacos, TSG, Severed, Tail Gunner, Fort Walton, anybody I may have missed. Welcome. I hope you guys are doing well. Happy Sunday. You can hear me now. Damn it. Okay. I've got a really interesting stream scheduled. To me, one of the important things to understand with where we are is kind of how we got here. If you understand some of the origin, Monday morning, 6 a.m., if you understand some of the origin of all of this radical behavior, and when I say origin, we can look at, Pat Robertson, Oral Roberts, Liberty University, all these, the people that we think of now back to the 70s. But I want to show you guys something I came across that I really didn't know that these two things merged the way they did, but it makes a lot of sense that the self-help gurus basically did steal the methods, the efforts, the tools of the carnival barker, of the evangelical, of the preachers, people that were spreading gospel as prophets. This is, hey, what's up, Mulder? This is a kind of an origin story of it. And we're going to get to it in just a little bit. But before we do, I want to show you some examples of where these Christian leaders are today.
If there is a silver lining to this, it could be that this could be the Lord warning us that the nation is in danger of collapsing. Its bridge to its noble past is being lost. And that...
So the idea for these people is to tie any of the boogeymen that they can to everything that they can to make it a conspiracy where every time anything happens to you in your existence or around you, it is part of a bigger plan, either by God or a bigger plan by the evil demon devil, which is everybody but you. Everybody that doesn't agree with you is the evil demon devil attacker, all of this. Because when it comes to modern day religious radicals, there's only two modes: mode of fear and that you're the victim, and mode of you have to attack to stop being the victim. Everything is manifested through you, the believer who listens to me, the prophet. You are superior to everybody else. You are the default, and everybody else is the problem. It's a Branch Davidian mentality. It's breeding Ted Kaczynski's, because the ongoing constant disillusionment of reality, that things that happen in the regular world, accidents, are now part of a divine plan to make you the winner of the victimhood that you are, and that it gives you the opportunity to go be violent, to go attack, to go murder, to kill, all in the name of God, because you're a soldier of God now, not a follower of God. See, somehow God is all powerful, but he needs truckers to drive around DC. God is all powerful, but he needs you to stop the election from being stolen, because apparently Tacos has cooties. Apparently, if you don't attack, then you're allowing the non-God people to have more control than God. And without you, God can't do what God wants to do. But also, every time you want your team to win, you ask the same God that needs your help to stop stolen elections to help your team win. So, or does God need you to do something so God can be productive? Or do you, I don't understand.
And that hacking might be
TP for his
the
bunghole
thing in the election that is the most warning us that the nation is in danger of collapsing its bridge to its noble past.
So, according to the religious right, the reason the bridge was hit was terrorists because of immigration. It was the harmful effects of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And at the same time, it was the evil left that did it, and the evil immigrants that did it. Also, it's a sign from God. So it was unavoidable and has nothing to do with DEI. It has nothing to do with immigration, because God wanted it to happen. And it's a sign from God that we need to stop diversity and only have us whites.
Is being lost. And that hacking might be the thing in the election that is the most dangerous
hacking
about what takes place. The news blackout,
the news blackout. He's literally talking about the 24 hours of the Hunter Biden story that happened under Trump's FBI. So, like, Trump's own departments were communicating with Facebook, and somehow that was Joe Biden. Just like all the Republicans that testified in the first impeachment, that was somehow the Democrats. And all the people that spoke to Mueller, who were Republicans and worked with Trump, those were actually the Democrats. And Mueller, who was hired by a Trump-appointed Republican, and he's a Republican, somehow that was the Democrats also. So no matter what happens, if you don't like it, it's the evil, dirty, demon Democrats.
They took Christmas away from us.
Oh my God, they took Christmas away. Get your fucking NC State shit off the shelf if you're going to be an asshole.
And now everyone wants to say season's greetings.
And oh my God, it's the war on Christmas. Holy fuck, where is Sam Cedar when you need him?
They're trying to take Easter away from us and make it a transgender day of visibility. But we are.
Wait, is the Easter Bunny a boy or a girl? Does the Easter Bunny have a dick or a vagina? Help me out. Does anybody know? What up, Lil Donnie? Does anybody know, is the Easter Bunny sporting a cock or a vag? I don't know. Does the Easter Bunny have pronouns, or do we just call the Easter Bunny as a pronoun? These things confuse me. Speak white. Oh, God.
Seeing is the anti-Christian bigotry at
well, okay then. I guess I will enunciate a little bit more then.
an all-time high. And I say to Christians out there, what are you going to do in November? You just got.
Oh, it's amazing how everything in Christianity deals with politics. So if you believe in diversity, it's the religion of diversity. If you believe in LGBTQ rights, it's the religion of the alphabet. If you believe in social justice, it's the religion of the woke left. If you believe in climate, then you are a demon of the evil attack on the green religion. You are. But you know who says that? The religious people. Everything is a religion but religion. Just like Republican politicians, doctors are political, the media is political, the FBI, the IRS, the social media, everything is political. The only people that don't do politics are right-wing Republicans, like this guy right here. He would never use religion to push his own political ideology and an agenda. He's just, using God to explain why God needs you to support Donald Trump, the 3-time married rapist, porn star affair having, sexual assault admitting, fraud convicted Antichrist. That's their man. They need the Antichrist rapist because Biden also, in addition to recognizing Easter all day, he also recognized trans people exist. It's kind of like the mortal sin of Dylan Mulvaney getting paid for a post by Bud Light. God would never stand for that. I mean, Ecclesiastes 87:62. All social media must be run and controlled by Christians. We know it's in there. It's in there. It must be.
Slapped in the face by the Obama.
There is nobody that has lost more court cases than Donald Jehoshaphat Trump.
Biden regime. How are you going to respond when you go to the polls? Will you support the party that peed on Easter Sunday?
What did Trump do on Easter Sunday? Now, what's funny is the religious right spends 95% of its time talking about how you have to fight back against the evil other people. Like, you want to know how Christians are fine with murdering people? You want to know how good Christians who know only God can decide who gets to kill? They're the ones that initiate the death penalty. There is no group of people more dedicated to getting to decide who dies than the Christian right. Because they believe they are the deity. I talk to God. If I say I talk to somebody in my head, that's a 5150. When these people say God crashed a bridge, God told me that he was going to send me a sign, and then God crashed the bridge, and I knew God was telling me directly when I talked to God, yo, this is a 5150. What up, Missy? You're going to like today. Today's a very interesting day. Day. Shout out to Right Wing Watch for cataloging all this.
The 8 to 16 million, depending on which data you follow, illegal aliens that have come.
There is nothing that Jesus hated more than migrants. From what I remember, what was it? Was it Isaiah 18:9-62? Build a wall around your encampments. Ensure that the poor and the needy never come in. Ensure that you maximize Ezekiel 51:50. There is a real sickness of using God to justify hatred, to justify genocide, to justify the desire for you to be able to violate all 10 commandments at once. Like, you literally want to lie while fucking your neighbor's wife, while praising false idols. Like, if the Bible was real, we would have locusts or cicada.
Come over in the last 3 years are counted in 2030 when we have the next census. You're going to have another.
So you know what this is? Like, has anybody realized what this is yet? Because Elon talked about this in his interview with Bill Apple, Don Lemon. He talked about how immigrants living in blue cities is destroying the election because of the allocation of population. This is the Republicans and the 3/5 compromise. This is the modern day 3/5 compromise. We don't see slaves, immigrants, as human. But we know there's an effect on the economy because you got to feed, house, clothes, help out the slaves. Immigrants. Yes, they're working. Yeah, but like, those are American jobs. And we need to keep them out.
Probably 10 to 15 seats that get reallocated for the Democrats. So I'm a big advocate.
If you don't know why the 3/5 compromise was in the Constitution, let me give you some historical background that I can't point to any proof of this, but I believe it to be true. The 3/5 compromise was to allocate for the bodies of slaves without letting them vote. So immigrants, we allocate for the body of immigrants without counting them as voters. They can't vote, but they count for allocation of resources and representation. And the people that are overrepresented in the Electoral College, where a Democrat has to win by 7 million votes to actually win. So like 81 million votes is roughly equal to 74 million votes from a Republican. So a vote in Wisconsin means more than a vote in California. And they still think that if 35% of the country chooses something and 50% of the country chooses something, well, the 35%, they're the real patriots. And so they should get to make the decision. This is rooted also when it comes to these radicals in the Seven Mountain Mandate. The Seven Mountain Dominionism, where they want a small percentage of the people, them, to control all areas of society so that they can implement religious freedom. The kind of freedom that costs you $8 a month.
Constitutional amendment to clearly define that the enumeration is only American citizens, not illegal aliens.
What up, Aiken? Mike Johnson just said they don't want to just make sure people that aren't citizens don't vote. They want you to have to prove you're a citizen. Like, they don't want they're past voter ID. to make sure certain people can't vote. They're on to, you have to prove your citizenship. So what are you going to need to do? Bring your birth certificate? I got to bring my birth certificate to register to vote now? Is that where we are? Like, I can't just use a valid ID because maybe it's fake. I mean, anybody can get a birth certificate or a driver's license. We got to make it like harder because we know homeless people and poor people might not have access to Social Security cards or birth certificates. So, and college kids definitely don't. So how can we prove a college kid is a citizen? I mean, it's all the same otherization because they're the victim of their supremacy. Aryans, they were the victims. Oath Keepers, victims. Neo-Nazis, they're the victims. Proud Boys, victims. Evangelicals, no religion across the wider globe is more persecuted than Christians, according to Mike Pence. The group that is most attacked in the world, white Christians.
Not legal aliens, not anyone that's not a citizen. And then you apportion Congress based on that. That was the intent of the Founding Fathers. That's why.
No, it wasn't. Show me in the Constitution where it says that. We got to get back to the Constitution. That sounds like, what's his name? McKibbins. We got to get back to the Constitution.
Why the language says that it doesn't include Indians not taxed because they were, sovereign land, not included. It's why they had the whole debate over slavery and the 3/5 clause.
Oh my God. I didn't watch any of these. He's advocating to go back to the 3/5 clause because that's what God would want. When God wrote the Constitution, this is what God wanted. You know what else God wants? God wants you to hit that like button and share the stream.
They were saying, if you're not going to let them vote and you're not going to let
Rumble, I made it through about an hour and 10 minutes in 6 hours.
them be citizens, you shouldn't get to count them on your numbers towards Congress. 3/5 clause, by the way, is an anti-slavery clause, not a pro-slavery clause. So
how? Oh, by the way, treating black people like they're less than human, that was anti-slavery, not pro-slavery. The 14th Amendment, Section 3 work automatically as intended. Yeah. Yep. I read Aiken. I read every fucking word, including words you didn't point out. There was some stuff on those pages that you may have actually missed with Russian collusion and some other stuff. Like a lot of the ads and shit down the right-hand side of the page said a ton.
anyway, that's what it's all about.
Hallelujah. Thanks. Praise like button.
Listen, I'm not dumb.
Oh, you gotta love it. You know what's funny? This guy's so poor, he doesn't even have a plane.
I don't know what happened with him and Stormy Daniels. I don't know what happened with him and E. Jean Carroll. He may be guilty of it all. And yes, call me a cult member. I don't care.
The admissions, the absolute dedication to being a heretic. It is amazing. Like, the idea that this guy is allowed to be a bigot because God talks to him. You know, I have voices in my head too. I think they're religious. They tell me Christians are all pieces of shit. And if you own a business, you should ask if they're Christian. And through your religious ideology, which they're not allowed to test your religious ideology, right? Because that would be a violation of your religion. My religious doctrine says I cannot do business with Christians. Therefore, if you are a Christian and you come in our store, all sales are based solely on you not being a Christian. And if we find out you're a Christian, we will place a lien on all property that you own. Home slice credit.
Why? No more than I would have cared what David did with Bathsheba.
Oh my God. You know what I was thinking?
We're living in a world that hates men, especially white men.
If I saw that he was winning the war.
It's a demonic anointing.
This is modern day Christianity. Like, I'm showing you this because the long video that we're going to go over, it's really important to understand where we are today and how craven these people are, how evil, like literally how evil they are. From what I hear about this guy.
Like you heard he fucked an ostrich, right?
Right?
Oh, that's greasy. That's
Yeah,
really
is.
fucking greasy. Yeah, it's greasy. Greasy.
Mario, and this is what was happening. Remember Barack Hussein Obama? He had.
Oh, so we're gonna throw in some Muslim fear mongering, right? Barack Hussein Obama. This isn't even a real background, is it? This is a fake background.
Had, I believe, a demonic anointing, and so it's opposite of holy. It's opposite of somebody walking in the authority of Jesus and the Holy Spirit. It's opposite.
Yeah, there's nothing, from what I remember from Hypocrites 18:42, God wants you to always attack others, complain, be the victim, become a martyr. This is what God, it's in there. It's in Hypocrisies 18:32.
Opposite of the favor of God. These men and these people are operating in a demonic anointing, and that's why they're able to do these things with little to no recourse. But the problem is the church.
Yeah, that's what was cracking me up. Like this guy, obviously it's a fake background. This guy tried to make it like he's trading stocks all day. Like he's a fucking day trader.
Needs to push back. And I know you're going to address that.
Yeah, well, one thing, would you say then that there is a demonic hedge around Biden that
Biden's a demon. You need your Second Amendment to raise up against the evil tyrannical government that is Joe Biden and his demonic force of the gays.
protects him from the way other leaders, and I think Obama was really the first.
Oh, the black guy was the first evil president that we had. And now the black guy's friend.
That really had this hedge around him.
So, anybody that has ever ruled against Donald Trump is a part of the devil. Anytime Donald Trump or Republicans lose, it's fixed, and it was an attack. And our country's being stolen by the evil left baby-killing Democrats who want to chop off your kid's wiener and groom them, teach them porn. And that's all because they took God out of the schools and they hate God.
But it's even more intense.
So get your guns, guys, in the name of God. Write God's name on your gun.
Now, because we have a president that can't finish a sentence. He's in no condition to lead at all. And his leading.
That's right.
And the way that.
To the Iranian connection. I got to tell you, though, I took a lot of notes because that's the only way I retain stuff. Like, I'm trying. I know all the names from the coup, right? I know all the names. I know that shit better than everybody else. But trying to work on both the Ramsey case and other stuff. The Ramsey case has as many fucking names as the coup. And then all the cicada back end stuff has more names than all of them. I probably have 40, 50 names from the first hour. Rumble Aiken has a documentary that came out a while back, a few months back, that's like almost 7 hours long. And when you think of documentary, you think of a narrative being told to you or shown to you in like a story that you can listen to. But this is a combination of like a little bit of story, but most of the story is like, you need to see this on this website. And it's like screenshots and scrolling where I have to pause and read the whole screen. And then another 6 seconds later, you got to pause and read the whole screen. So it is like a full, I don't know, semester of learning to get through this 7 hours, because it's everything from religion to cicada to QAnon and grifting and the social media manipulation. It's crazy. It's a lot.
Acting as if this is okay is not logical. It's not practical. It's not human. There's something very obviously almost catatonic about it. And I believe that it's a spell. It's a demonic hedge. Is that what you're saying?
Are you saying Joe Biden is a demon? All right, one more.
And I think what we're getting ready to see prophetically in the earth and in this.
There's no chance in the world. There's no chance in the world that's not a stage name. No fucking shot. There is no shot this guy was born Kent Christmas. I'll bet you he took that name on after he came out of prison. This guy was probably in prison.
This nation is God is going to do something supernatural that's going to bring light and expose all of this stuff we've been through. And I want to encourage listeners, don't let the media sway you. Don't let the lies of the enemy deter you. God is raising up a remnant that is anointed and powerful, and we're going to win this battle. And I don't think
everything is a war, a battle, a fight. Like everything. The Tracy Bean stuff is too good. I had to watch some of her trucker convoy videos. Yeah. Yep. There's a lot of interesting characters that nobody ever knows about. And that's why it's like impossible to try to explain all the where we are. I said to somebody, after spouting off like a whole bunch of names, a whole bunch of information, afterwards, it's like if you spoke to a regular normie and I said all the things like I said, they would think I'm QAnon. Short stack goblin porn. They would think I'm QAnon. That these evangelicals and this religion and these subversive online groups and these ex-intelligence and Russians, and I sound crazy, but it's all true. I mean, that's conspiracy and conspiracy nuts, like discussing a real provable conspiracy of people that conspired together sounds like fantastical baby eating blood rituals.
Politically, we're going to win it.
And they did that on purpose. Like, that's part of the manipulation game. That if they can tell you everybody else is a pedophile, you'll look ridiculous for accusing them of being pedophiles. If they accuse everybody else of doing blood rituals, you would sound like a maniac for saying they want to do blood rituals. Like, but we know they say everybody else is a groomer, and what do they want to do? They want to groom kids. Like, literally, they want to groom kids. That's what Christianity is. What the fuck else is Christianity to a child? Do what I say, or you're going to spend eternity in hell. And if you actually are good enough, and you don't make me beat you as often as I have to, then you'll go to heaven. But if not, if you don't listen to me, you're going to go to hell. Let me take away these video games because they're made by the demon. No, you can't watch Harry Potter. No, all you can watch is this Mormon cartoon because other cartoons want to indoctrinate you. Other cartoons are the religion of cartoon wokeness. So our Mormon cartoon is the only one you can have. The Democrats want to indoctrinate your kids, which is why you need our children's book about conserving the Constitution.
Just through natural means. I believe that God is going to step in, hold up our arms, and begin to release an anointing that deals with some of these wicked people.
There we go. It's all rooted now in fear of loss and fear. So you see, my background is a little interesting. I was fourth generation in the car business, and through my whole life, I got an inside look at a rapidly growing small business that turned into a real, actual, like, big business. It went from one dealership to 6 over a period of like 10 years. And that requires you to create efficiencies, to reduce redundancies. And that is the kind of thing that gets us to when you understand capitalism and economics, and you're not looking at things from a standpoint of fairness, and you're not looking at things as a social responsibility for the betterment of all of us, that getting less can be more. Less money can be a better living. Like, there's a lot of things that they don't really ingrain in you when money and business are the driving force. Now, for me, I wanted some sort of balance. I didn't want to work 6 days a week from 8 in the morning to 9 at night. That's not what I wanted to live. And so, as I worked in our dealerships, I started to develop kind of a duality, an understanding of management and the owner's side, but also understanding that it's not management that does the work. I mean, I always thought it was. Like, you need a coach, you need to organize people. But my father used to refer to the people that did the accounting, who was the controller, that did the title work. He used to refer to them as non-income producing employees. And recently I explained to him how wrong he actually was. Because if you sell a car and nobody does the title work, you don't sell a car. It's that simple. Like, it's that simple. So how could the salesman be income producing if nobody would do payroll? Right?
Well, selling a car is just like fishing, Wilbur. You bait the hook, you throw it out, and then you reel them in real slow. You ask them questions about their family, what they do. You act like you're interested. And once you get their trust, kapowie! You just sold a car!
So not only was I in the car business, when I left the car business, I got into real estate. Well, first I got an insurance license, learned how to sell life insurance. Then I got a real estate license and was a realtor, created a real estate team, was cutting edge marketing back then. Then I started working for an agent training company and was training the new agents while also having a real estate license. Later, I ended up in the mortgage industry and learned that. Ended up being a recruiter, trainer, coach for a real estate company. And an interesting thing that happened while I was a realtor, I was introduced to the world of multi-level marketing. And I know how it was phrased to me. Oh, wait, sorry. I missed a step. When I was in college, I enjoyed listening to self-help stuff, but also there was a guy back then. See if I can find it real quick. Carlton Sheets, No Money Down. I had this. I bought this.
Receive that $875 payment for 5 years.
I spent the money and I bought the Carlton Sheets How to Buy a Home with No Money Down program. And unlike the 99.8% of people that buy a course, I actually used it to buy a house while I was in college. I bought my first house. It cost me $46,700 through the FHA loan program, which was 3.5% down payment at the time, lower qualifications, less time on the job. You could get up to 6% of the sale price in seller assistance. So basically, you can raise the price of the sale so that they can give you the 6% back, which covered all my closing costs. It cost me in total $900. It cost me literally $900 to buy a house. Like literally $900 with the inspection, all the closing costs, more everything. It cost me $900 out of pocket. It was a 2-unit and cost me like $16 plus utilities for my portion because the tenant paid almost all of the mortgage, the PITI. And I sold it about 1.5 years later, and I bought it for $46,700. I sold it for in the 70s. I left closing with a check for $23,000. So it cost me less to live in, cost me less than a down payment on a rental to buy, and I made $23,000 right out of college. And this came from a fucking, like, what would be an online course now. Like Hustler's U or Grant Cardone or any of these self-help gurus. Now, after that, I was a big fan of Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. Norman Vincent Peale was at The Power of Positive Thinking. Earl Nightingale. Bob Proctor, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I don't know if I have the right attributions for the authors. But what I didn't know when I got into multi-level marketing is that they're all the same. They're all the same grift. They use the same language, the same processes, the same techniques, the same pay scales, basically. And most importantly, the same tactics of training. Well, there's some interesting stuff that you might hear today. So I used to listen to Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, all these positive people, NLP, yeah, all these positive thinking people. And Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra. There's so much of it. Okay? And the problem is there is some validity to it, as proven by the Carlton Sheets and there is validity to some of the stuff being taught. It's basically like mindfulness with affirmation with belief. And when I talk about belief, I need you to understand, my dad was the most successful person that I knew. And when I was looking to buy a house, he told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I'm going to destroy my credit, and it's going to be a big mistake. And against his stern warnings, I bought the house. And it was one of those things where I had to believe in myself more than other people believed I couldn't do it. Against all things around me that said, this is dangerous and you may fuck up and don't do it. I had to somewhere find the courage, the ability to be independent of the good opinion of others. It's a line that I heard from Wayne Dyer that is from somebody else. There's a lot of these things that are valuable that come from these motivational speakers. And irritate people. So when it comes to these MLMs, there is, and self-help, there is an insidious nature too. Anything that is a form of manipulation that works will be used for good and co-opted for bad. A lot of these techniques I didn't realize were rooted in religion. I didn't realize the self-help industry was just an offshoot of radical religious expansion. And I can tell you from being fully bought in and involved with multi-level marketing companies, the recruiting process, the training process, there is an indoctrination that occurs. There is a cult programming that occurs, which anybody that doesn't believe in you is kind of the enemy. They're just there to stop you. They don't want you to succeed. They want you to be miserable like them. And it is creating this, we're better than everybody else. We're smarter. We're willing to put ourselves out there. The only problem is these people are brainwashing you based on knowing out of every 400 of you, 2 of you are going to actually make a living. The other 398 of you are going to get fucked. You're going to lose money. Well, 4 of you might not lose money. You might break even or make a couple $100. 2 of you, 400, you're going to make real money. And the rest of you, many of you are going to get divorced. You're going to get your car repossessed. You're going to be in serious debt because I'm going to convince you to give up your regular life for this fucking pipe dream. And everybody that was trying to save you from it, we're going to make them the enemy. And one way we're going to do that is through trainings. And when I say trainings, we had a weekly meeting. We had a monthly seminar. We had every couple months regional events in which you were encouraged to buy tickets to and go to. Every event you're at, they sell tickets to the next event. And if you're not committed, don't buy the tickets. But if you really are committed to yourself, get tickets for you and other people. And you got to get this training book. You got to buy the book. And you got to get these tapes because it's the tapes, right? It's the tapes that make all the difference. And I knew that the tapes was a money-making venture. That when you're a multi-level marketing company, there's the products, and then there's the ancillaries. the brochures that you got to buy, the flyers, the fucking invitations, all of it, all of the other stuff. And that's a business in itself that nobody pays any attention to. And I came across this video a couple days ago, and it talks about the origins of these tools and this cult. Yes, it's very Scientology based. So I heard this, and the sad thing is, I do know the grift of these Tony Robbins types, but I didn't know how rooted in the manipulation of religion it is.
The most bizarre and influential organizations in recent American history. The story of the men who built it, principally this man, Dexter Yeager, and the story of this organization's epic battle against the multi-level marketing corporation that it both relied upon for its existence and which was also its mortal enemy at the same time. This organization, which doesn't even have an official name, was and is a business that generated hundreds of millions of dollars across 6 decades, enriched a tiny number of its top kingpins to levels of virtually unimaginable wealth, and granted those men access to the most exclusive corridors of power. To hear the stories of some who were in it, this organization also stole people's souls, drove them into poverty, and wrecked the lives of many more.
How many like the extra money you pick up on tools? Most of y'all are not doing half the...
All right, that's a little fast. When they say tools, what they're talking about is training materials. Most specifically, tapes, motivational tapes. That if I can keep you listening to these tapes, when you're not with me, I got a better chance of keeping you brainwashed.
Lives of many more.
How many like the extra money you pick up on tools? Most of y'all are not doing half the tool business you should be doing. You know why? Because it's better than it's ever been.
The story of this organization is not exactly...
That is somebody talking to their leaders in the recruiting of failures. They're talking about making more money by selling the tapes themselves.
Exactly unknown, but it isn't often told as a story unto itself, meaning it gets mentioned on the fringes of this subject or that one, but almost no one has ever sought to chronicle its history and evaluate its significance. What is this thing whose story we're going to tell here? Who was Dexter Yeager? Who was Bill Britt and Doug Weed? Why did the corporation that hated this organization, one of whose executives wrote a memo condemning it, try to destroy it and then later surrender to it? What happened on the terrace of the Fontainebleau?
I had this on in the background. And the reason this jumps out at me is I've spent a fair amount of time in South Beach in Miami. And the Fontainebleau is like a world famous hotel. But it's also a great story, like the murder of one of the owners.
Hotel in Miami Beach in April 1983, and why is it important? I'm going to try to answer all those questions, and in doing so, try to forge some basis of understanding this shadowy, semi-transparent elephant that marches almost unnoticed through decades of American history. This is the story of the Amway Tools Cult. My name is Sean Munger. I'm a historian, teacher, and author, and I tell a lot of stories from history.
Fucking nerd!
On this channel, but none have been quite like this one. This is a lengthy video and a very in-depth story. But when I think you're done, I think you'll agree that it needs to be done in depth in order to give you a full appreciation of the very strange beast that we're dealing with here. A version of this story also appears on my Substack blog, which you can find at seanmungerhistory.substack.com. I also appeared recently as a guest on a bonus episode of Roberta Blevins' podcast, Life After MLM, to tell this story. That should be out on November 16th. So shout out to Roberta and the excellent anti-MLM community, which I think might find this story particularly compelling. There's also a side video.
Yeah, this is the one I sent you. You're going to love this. Like, Rumble, you may learn something here.
Much shorter, a companion piece to this one where I talk a little bit about the process of researching and making this video, some of the sources I used, and some of the things I left out, some things I'm not going to cover here in the main show. First things first, I am not an MLM survivor myself, and this video is not your typical MLM horror story. While the Amway Tools Cult does still exist in the present day.
Yeah. I was supposed to be on that helicopter. No, you fucking weren't. No, you fucking weren't. You're a fucking liar. He's a fucking liar.
Which is highly troubling.
I was just listening to something, Tim O'Brien the guy that wrote, helped him write Art of the Deal, I think. He was talking about, no. Okay. It was Michael Cohen interviewing the cousin of Roy Cohn, the guy that taught Donald delay, distract, and attack. But delay, distract, and there's another D. I can't remember what it was.
My focus here is on its history and not its present incarnation. I'm a historian, and my main interest is what happened in the past and why it matters in the present. Here's how we're going to proceed. First, we have to define
Herbalife, absolutely. Amway. Well, he talks about 3 different MLMs also.
What the Amway tools cult
But I can tell you 25, 30 years after what he's talking about, the tapes industry is still a huge moneymaker. Like, all the top different people record the tapes, and then they get money for the tapes that they recorded.
is and how it works. There's some conceptual groundwork.
So when they tell you they're making $30,000 a month, they're not telling you 20 of it is coming from you buying fucking tapes.
We have to lay, and that's not easy given the challenge of describing an organization that has no official name and which developed more or less organically, and which is also as secretive as the mafia and just about as hard to document. Then we'll be delving into the early history of
Also, if you want to avoid the devil snatching up your firstborn, hit the like button.
tools business, how it began, whose idea it was, and how it became such a profitable venture. Next will come the story of the battle between the tools cult and the Amway Corporation, which occurred principally in 1982 and 83. We're going to cover the aftermath of that battle, and we're going to have to look at how the participants in this story came to be wired into the economic, political, and religious fabric of late 20th century and 21st century America. So again, this is not just about MLMs or Amway or the religious right or even Dexter Yeager as a historical figure, although the story does touch on all of those aspects. Periodically, I'm also going to show my sources. I did this recently on another...
Didn't know if it was true. I heard the story through Ed Opperman. Which story? Oh, about the helicopter. Yeah.
Other series of videos about the true story of the...
Yeah. He pulled an anti-Carol Baskin. And was like, no, I was supposed to be on that.
JFK assassination. Oswald acted alone, by the way. And while I can't put links to all my sources directly into this video or the description, you will occasionally see them pop up on the screen, like this one just did as an example. And if you're interested in delving deeper into the documents themselves, you'll at least know where you can find them. 2 primary sources are absolutely vital to this story. They are the Postma memo and the audio tape of the...
I did just hear about 2 laptops. Where did I hear that? Also, we're not doing court ordered, but the lady that stole Biden's daughter's diary just got fucked in court.
The Miami Beach Fontainebleau Hotel meeting.
Diddy style.
From April 1983, which I termed the Miami Showdown. Later in the video, you'll hear some of the actual words that were spoken that day.
With this situation you got, you can't give up your income because if you did, it means Chapter 13 or bankruptcy for you.
Good history relies on documented sources. You'll see them here, and for those perhaps sympathetic to multi-level marketing operations, my presentation of sources will prove that I'm not just making this up. So if you're ready to delve in, let's first try to define what the tools cult is and what its relationship is to...
Yo, Aiken, while I was watching your doc, all of a sudden, that building on that famous building, the blue and white building on Epstein Island, all of a sudden made sense.
To the multi-level marketing business called Amway. The entirety of this story depends on that relationship. But before we do that, you have to understand a few basics about Amway itself. There are several layers of context here that we have to get through. This is the first one. So to start, let's go back in time to the 1970s.
Bow chicka bow wow.
Imagine it's sometime in the latter part of the 1970s. Vietnam is over, Jimmy Carter is in the White House, Archie Bunker is on TV,
I just made an Archie Bunker reference to my mom this morning.
Bottoms and polyester are all the rage, and gas is in short supply. A friend, most likely a white middle-class man, comes to you and tells you about a great business opportunity and how he'd love to get to...
Hey, I don't know why I didn't think of this last week when I talked to you, but I know I haven't said anything, but I started my own business like a few months back, and it's really starting to go well, and it may be something you want to take a look at. I know you could use some extra money. We talk about it all the time, and this might just be the way to help solve some of your financial issues. I know I don't put like full time into it, but I'm starting to see some returns already. I don't want to mess up explaining it to you. I got somebody coming in from Ohio next week that's going to, you know, talk to us business owners. Why don't you come with me? I have a ticket for you. I'll bring you with me.
Together with you to explain it. So you get in your AMC Pacer and drive to the meeting over at your friend's house. Your friend produces butcher paper and some markers and draws a bunch of circles on them, explaining how you can make a lot of money. Not by selling SA8, which is soap, or LOC, which is also soap, but by sponsoring others to sell soap. And then you take a cut of everything they make. Your friend doesn't even mention until the
I saw the name Tracy Twyman. I wrote it down, I think.
Into the presentation that it's Amway. And even that, the involvement of Amway seems pretty minor. They're just the corporation that manufactures the soap.
You know, I saw the name because 3 people died in rapid succession. Her, Cappy, and somebody else.
I just described is the classic Amway entry experience for tens of thousands of people, not just in the 1970s, but down to the present day. It's called showing the plan, or in slang terms, drawing circles. And a story like this is at the beginning of nearly every Amway account. Amway, a portmanteau of the words American Way, used in somewhat Orwellian fashion here, was a company founded in 1949 and eventually named Amway later by 2 salesmen, Richard DeVos and Jay Van Andel, who were formerly salesmen in another organization, Neutralite, which is generally regarded as the first multi-level marketing company.
Neutralite.
Both DeVos and Van Andel were conservative.
Did you recognize that name by any chance? Is there a name you just recognized by any fucking chance to tie to the Trump Republican fascism? Did you hear the name?
2 salesmen, Richard DeVos and Jay Van.
Did you hear it? Did you hear it? One more time.
Founded in 1949 and eventually named Amway later by 2 salesmen, Richard DeVos and Jay Van Andel.
Do you know anybody else by the name of DeVos? Anybody else jump out at you by the name of DeVos? I don't know. The recent person that Trump put in charge of our Department of Education who tried to dismantle the system of education. This is who these people are.
Who were formerly salesmen in another organization, Neutralite, which is generally regarded as the first multi-level marketing company. Both DeVos and Van Andel were conservative evangelical Calvinists, and their fundamentalist worldview shaped the entire Amway universe. The tangled history of the regarded as the first multi-level marketing company. Both DeVos and Van Andel were conservative evangelical Calvinists, and their fundamentalist worldview shaped the entire...
It all stems from a Christian grift. All of it. A Christian grift tied to the government and rich people to steal money from poor people. Imagine that. It's almost like their governing philosophy. How can we give socialism to the rich and powerful and authoritarianism to the shitty poor?
Higher Amway universe. The tangled history of the...
Why? Hey, Rumble. Is there any attachment between Calvinism and Golden Dawn?
The invention of multi-level marketing, Neutralite, and the founding of Amway is documented in the excellent book Ponzi-nomics, The Untold Story of Multi-Level Marketing by Robert Fitzpatrick.
Why do I know Fitzpatrick, though?
The leading academic who studies the MLM phenomenon and how it relates to American business history and culture. This book is essential reading for anyone who wants to understand this segment of the economy and the inner workings of the entire MLM system. Although Amway has changed a little bit since the
the fact that the court can mandate AA and AA requires that you submit to God, that is so fucked up. Like, a criminal punishment is to have to accept God.
70s and 1980s,
a higher
period
power.
that we'll be discussing in this video. In essence, today, it's essentially the same as it was then. So a little bit of jargon. If you accept your friend's invitation and join Amway, what you've just done is to become a distributor, or in Amway speak, an IBO, independent business owner. You've just joined.
Or, in the case of Market America, an unfranchised owner. I own my own business development center. It's an unfranchised. It's all the benefit of a franchise, but without the overhead and the problems. I can tell you what, I later bought a real fucking franchise, and you make a whole lot more money with a better chance of success with a real franchise than a fucking unfranchised.
Joined a line of sponsorship. Your friend is your upline. You are in his...
Oh my God, I hate the way this graphic... When it comes to at least graphic design, I hate this. Like, there needs to be either an outline or a shadow behind these letters.
Downline, which means that that you order all of your Amway products, soap mostly, from him. All of the products. The soap that you buy for yourself, and more importantly, the stuff that you sell to the people that you recruit to sell Amway, or your downline. In the 1970s, once a week, you would get into your AMC Pacer and drive to your friend's house to pick up your boxes of soap and some other stuff, which becomes important later. Anyway, you pick up your stuff at his house, and then presumably you set up a meeting for your downline, who will drive to your house in their Ford Maverick or Woody station wagon to pick up their stuff from you. But here's the...
Yo, side note, when I owned my sign shop, I turned a Cadillac SRX, the SUV, I turned it into a Woody. I'll see if I can find the picture.
Rob, how many people do you know, realistically, who are going to sign up to buy soap from you, or food bars, or whatever else it is that Amway sells? Chances are pretty good that if you ever succeed at recruiting anyone else into the business, which is monolithically what Amway distributors call it, you'll quickly run out of people to hustle. So if you want to stay in, it will be just you, your AMC Pacer, and a couple of boxes of soap that you bought from your friend. In 1980, the Wisconsin Attorney General...
There you go. That was so iconic in the area. People would literally be like, "Are you the guy that owns that Woody?" I mean, the way how it is so easy to use nostalgia to reach people.
Crunch the numbers on the top.
Which the shame of Make America Great Again is just a desire for nostalgia. But it's a nebulous nostalgia that allows each of you to create your own version of the nostalgia. Yeah, here's the other one I liked that I drove. Put a Lambo on the side, so when I back out, it looks like the Lambo's backing out also.
1% of Amway distributors in that state to see what they really made. The result was shocking. Though most of those 1% did post a profit on paper, but with operating costs deducted, almost every single one of them lost money on a net basis, with the average loss penciling out to $900. Now, this was the top 1% of all distributors in Wisconsin. Thus, an infinitesimal sliver of
these numbers are still the same. When we watched, if you remember the one uninformed I did, one of the one uninformed that I did with Jungler, we watched CoffeeZilla dismantle Patrick Bet-David and his multi-level marketing company that made him rich. Like, PBD is not just a multi-level marketing scumbag. It was his MLM. Like, he wasn't part of somebody's MLM. He left MLMs and started his own.
Distributors actually made a profit. Your odds of winning at gambling in a casino are mathematically higher than they are at making money in Amway. So these are the basics of how Amway distributorships work. There are legions of documents, blogs, YouTube videos, and other content to demonstrate this. And indeed, this kind of material is the central focus of a majority of the anti-MLM community when they talk about Amway. That analysis is fundamentally correct. Chances are virtually
Scamway
certain that you will lose money becoming an Amway distributor or really in any multi-level marketing scheme. But the real
earlier, it just hit me again when we were saying like names like Vanilla ISIS and Al Qaeda. And Taco said Wall Martyr. And I thought that was that's my new favorite. You're not just a martyr, you're a wall martyr.
Story of this video goes deeper than that. It's the tools cult, which sort of hides behind the public face of the Amway experience. That is the next layer of context, and it's in the next chapter. So what is the tools business, and why is it sometimes referred to as a cult?
Is this like a 70s porno soundtrack?
You might think tools refers to hammers or wrenches or rakes or something. Not in this context. In describing how Amway works, remember I said back in the bell-bottom Jimmy Carter 1970s, you'd just been hustled by your friend to become an Amway distributor. And after he's tantalized you with illusory promises of all the wealth you'll enjoy by recruiting other people to sell soap, you load the Amway starter pack into the back of your AMC Pacer. And that box contains soap samples, obviously, but it also contains something else. In the 1970s, a newly recruited distributor or independent business owner would find in that box a couple of books, such as The Possible Dream by Charles Paul Kahn, The Magic of Thinking Big by David J. Schwartz, and Don't Let Anyone Steal Your Dream by a fellow named Dexter Yeager. Also included would be a couple of cassette tapes. Pop one of those tapes into your cassette player on the drive home from your friend's house, assuming that your AMC Pacer is posh enough to have a cassette player, and out of the speakers will come a man's voice, talking about how you have to seize your dreams. And
okay. I want you to understand how much staying power and successful this is. Because in the 2000s, the early 2000s, I myself had a system that I was using for when I would recruit people. I had a 3-folder system. Every folder came with like tasks and jobs and shit you had to do. But every one of them came with at least one tape. Because if I could keep you listening to the tapes, I had a better chance of you succeeding. But I'm a sneaky fuck. And the first tape that I had, I think that I gave him was called The Dash. And The Dash is simply a long motivational tape, like a 90-minute tape, all based on stealing the idea of a poem. And here's the poem.
I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on her tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of her birth and spoke of the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that she spent alive on earth. And now only those who loved her know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real, and always try to understand the way other people feel, and be less quick to anger, and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect, and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read, with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? And I want to...
So that is the poem. But when you understand how to harness different emotions and social engineer a crowd, it looks like this.
A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Today marks a new beginning.
This is an early convention. You see how it's in like a small venue? By the time I was in it, they were in fucking like stadiums, indoor arenas, 20, 30,000 seats. 4-day conference. People in the seats from fucking 12 hours a day.
Some people have said that we dream too big. I say those people think too small. Dream big, you'll never be bigger than your dreams.
One day, I said,
what lies
get in the
behind?
car. We're going somewhere. She said, where? I said, we're going to the graveyard. She looked at me and said, what?
Now, watch how he takes this story. He takes somebody's poem and he turns it into like a personal story, like he created this.
Are you nuts? She didn't know what she was doing. She hadn't been going out with me that long. We started driving along. She's sitting there, where are we really going? I said, we're going to the graveyard, okay? And some of you need to do this. And we went to the graveyard. I said, get out of the car. We got out of the car.
Now, no, they record these speeches and they sell them as tapes.
So let's walk down these aisles and find somebody that we like. Let's see here. Let's find a good one. Oh, here we go. Betty and Joe. Joe, you won't believe what we found, man. We can really live it up now. I mean, we can have the cars that we want. We can take vacations in Saint-Tropez or Hawaii. I mean, we can go to Aspen in the winter and ski. I mean, we can give our kids the education that they want. We can do whatever we want, Joe. Get up. Come on, Mary, get up. You won't believe what we can do. Doggone things just lay there, dead. I said, see, Lauren, if we don't do something about our lives, we're going to end up right there soon. And you know what's funny about that tombstone? Every one of them, they have a birth date and a death date, don't they? A birth date and a death date. And you didn't have very much to do with that birth date. You couldn't help when you came into the world protesting, screaming, upside down and naked. And you didn't have much to do with that death date either. Bald and naked again. Now, you might be able to extend it a little bit with OPC3 and Prime, but when the good
those are products.
Lord calls, he calls. But you know what the funny thing is? On every one of those birth dates and death dates on those tombstones, there's a dash between them. And you know what the real question is? What did you do with the dash? Would you agree with that? What did
This is motivational. Like I'm saying, the reason techniques last, even when you know the tricks, it's because they work. Like, I recognize when people are doing sales techniques, but it doesn't matter if I recognize it because they work. And I don't mean they work as to get me to do something I don't want to do, but they work to elicit a response that, an example, when I bought my Maserati, that the manager was amazing. And a long story short, I got to a point, I knew how many days on the lot the car had been. I know they floor plan their cars, which means every day the car sits on the lot, they own it for more money, in essence. So it costs them more money to own that car every day. Normally, a place like that, with a car like that, they'd want to turn it every 90 days. That's a typical target. Or at least it was. Maybe for a high end, it's a little higher than that. But, you know, going over all of the things of why he wants to get rid of that car from a dealer's perspective was what I was doing. And he agreed, and we got a decent price. And finally, I was like, you know, let me go think about this, because I don't have my checkbook, and I don't want to have to do all this other stuff. And honestly, I don't really need it. And he goes, well, let me just stop you. Nobody buys a Maserati because they need it. And I knew exactly what he just did, but he also was 100% right. And it's so disarming when they get it right that it works.
Well, selling a car is just like fishing, Wilbur. You bait the hook, you throw it out, and then you reel them in real slow. You ask them questions about their family, what they do. You act like you're interested. And once you get their trust, kapowie! You just sold a car!
There are so many techniques, Missy. Like, what I used to call that is, what is it? Is it? I know you're not saying no. I know you want to think about it. I totally respect that. I know you're not saying no. What I guess I'm curious about is, what is it that you're going to think about? Are you going to think about the marketing plan? Like, do you think the marketing plan I have to get your home sold, do you think that is the problem? Like, is that what you're most going to think about? No. Okay, well, is it that you don't want to move that you might want to think about? No. Is it the price that you want to think about? Not really. Actually, you were right in the ballpark. Was it me? Is it me that you want to think about? What is it? Is it? That way I can find out what objection you actually have because you're giving me a stall. I want to pray about it. Cool, let's pray right now. Fuck it. God doesn't need you to pray at night. Why wait? Let's pray right now. Girl, hold my hand. Like, knowing what to say, how to say it, why to say it. We don't want to list we're uncomfortable signing a 180-day contract. Well, I showed you based on the price you want to use, the average days on market is 100. I would not be very good at my job if I agreed to take 90 days when it's going to take 100 to sell it. So like if I'm taking a trip across the desert and it's a 180-day trip or a 100-day trip, do I want to take 90 days worth of water, 100 days worth of water? Or do I want to make sure I have enough in case there's an accident and something goes wrong? And so I want 180 days worth of water to take a 100-day trip across the desert. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Sign the paper. There are so many techniques to elicit the answer to a question people don't want to answer. And when you learn how to do that, and you learn how to overcome their self-doubt, then you can target a certain personality type that believes in themselves, believe there's a secret to getting ahead. And this is a cult. These are cults. And these religions are cults. These MLMs are cults. These self-help gurus are cults.
Vision success in order to make it.
What's your bid gonna be? Diamond! Diamond! Diamond!
NLP.
Believe in diamond. This business is for winners. When you drive up in your brand new coach, flashing the jewelry, your wife in a new fur coat, you'll know why you worked so hard.
This is building mental ownership. When you take somebody on a test drive, let's say there's a couple, husband and wife, and they're out shopping for a car. If you know what you're doing, the car salesman sits in the back seat, tells them what turns to make, answers their questions, shuts the fuck up. Why? Because you want them picturing themselves driving this fucking car every day. I'm not going to be in the back annoying them trying to build rapport in their car. I want them to imagine them owning their fucking car. When I'm helping somebody sell a house, I want every sign of who lives in that house gone. I don't want somebody to imagine what it's like for you to live in the house. I want somebody to imagine what it would be like for them to live in your house.
You'll know why you're diamond.
Those are the tools. Tapes, books, and also live seminars and rallies, all of them of a motivational nature. Later, as the tool system became more sophisticated, the tools would eventually include things like a special voicemail system called Amvox. But as our paradigm case is in the 1970s, let's stick with books, tapes, seminars, and rallies. In Amway parlance, they're known...
So that's what I mentioned before. Books, tapes, seminars, rallies.
Sometimes as BSM.
I actually for a while, I was in charge of organizing the weekly meeting, which involves like people doing product displays and people being greeters and working the front sign-up table. And, you know, you're running a little small volunteer organization. And then I also was partially responsible for the monthly events. I had a large group of deaf people that I worked with, so making sure there was a special seating segment and an ASL interpreter.
Or business support materials.
Rapport building is for before the test drive. I actually, while in college, rewrote the sales process for the dealership to become Blue Oval certified, which was Ford's version of the Chrysler 5-star. And the one thing that I did different than most is if you were, I walked you out to your own car first. And I wanted you to show me everything you like and don't like about your existing car. That way, I get to build some rapport. I learn about you. I get to see how you keep your vehicle, even if you're not trading it in. I learn what your hot buttons are, what all your limitations are. I'll never have another car without air conditioning. I have to have power windows. Fuck these cranks. So I have all the ammunition I need before we even get in the car.
What the tools are supposed to do is to help Amway distributors recruit people to sell soap and also other trinkets that the Amway Corporation manufactures, such as food bars and energy drinks and other incidental merchandise. But the big deal is to recruit, show the plan, draw circles. That's the lifeblood of the Amway business. And that's also the definition of multi-level marketing. Those tools are supposed to motivate you to succeed. So just to be clear, your buddy who got you into Amway will never explicitly require you to buy the tapes, but he might and probably will say something like this, quote,
So my first tape of the folders I had was a blank tape. And so when I told people, here's your folder for this week, listen to the tape, and next week return the folder and the tape. And at some point I would say, did you listen to the tape? What'd you think of the tape? Oh, it was great. I loved it. I gave them a blank tape. So if they didn't call me and tell me, hey, man, something's wrong with this tape, I knew they didn't listen to the tape. I never had to explain to them why I wasn't going to work with them or give them my time. I had a test that did it for me. If they didn't tell me the tape was blank, they didn't listen to the tape. And they're willing to lie to me about the easiest thing, like listening to a tape.
I want to help you in every way I can. It would be a disservice not to sell you the tapes and books and tickets. Hey, you'll be moving dozens of these down through your organization in a few months. In practice, the purchase of the tapes and books and seminar tickets isn't really optional. The fiction that it is a fig leaf to confer a veneer of legality on what would otherwise be.
We're not telling you what content you have to do. But if you don't do specific content, we're going to stop paying you. Also, if you want your channel to grow, this is a specific topic that other people will promote for you.
Illegal business. Even the Amway Corporation itself documented the pressure put on distributors to buy the tools. If they didn't, the uplines would refuse to associate with them, which would kill their businesses. In the 1980s and into the 90s, the tapes cost $5 a piece and were often pre-sold to Amway distributors by an arrangement known as the standing order. This meant that the distributor agreed to buy a tape, usually once a week, every week, regardless of what it was, until the order was canceled, which it would almost never be. In fact, the tools business was even more rapacious than that. One of the kingpins of the tools business, Doug Weed, who features prominently in the later part of this story, said that the wife of a fellow kingpin, Betty Jo Renfro, once upbraided him for talking at an Amway rally about the quote-unquote tape of the week. According to Weed, Renfro said to him, quote, "Don't you ever talk about the tape of the week to our group. We move more than one tape a week. We have the tape of the day or the tape of the hour," end quote. So remember, these tapes were selling for $5 a piece, circa 1980. $5 in 1980 is about $17 in today's money. The markup on these tapes was colossal. They cost about 60 cents a piece to make. The tapes were not just sold to distributors through the usual process of distributing products to their downlines, that procedure driving to your friend's house to pick up the order. They were also...
I sold weed to make my way through college. I sold a bunch of weed. Me and my buddy went through 10 pounds a month, like clockwork. And that's way more moral than this.
Also sold at rallies and seminars themselves. Kingpins would set up...
I mean, the success rate of everybody I sold to was 100%.
Tables at the entrances to these rallies, often in large hotel ballrooms or in some cases stadiums or sports venues, and offer all the latest tapes at a huge markup. Much of the time, these materials sold out. Distributors buying them, distributors who were attending the rallies, who just had to...
Like when you go to the bigger events, like half of it is a pitch for you to buy the books, buy the training material, buy the clothes, buy the fucking brochures.
Have that little extra dose of motivation. Table sales of tapes and books at Amway rallies could yield the kingpins as much as $10,000 a night in cash. That's big, big money. In fact, it's far more money than the pittance that distributors are making by selling soap to one another.
Now, before he gets into religious stuff, hold on. Before he gets into religious stuff, keep in mind the trade-off is give me money and I'm going to give you something that isn't money, but it's better than money. In fact, give me your money. I'm going to give you this thing that's going to help you 10x your money. This is prosperity gospel. Seed gospel. Do you want your life to get better? Give me $26. I'll send you some seeds. You can plant the seeds. By the way, now you got to send me $100.
Another. Thus, what we're really talking about here is two businesses. The first is the Amway business itself, which is dependent on drawing circles and showing the plan to gain a never-ending stream of recruits who buy products like LOC, soap, and SA8, also soap, and those profits inure to the benefit of the Amway Corporation, who's the manufacturer of those products. The second business is the sale of tools to Amway distributors. Although these businesses are related, they are separate. The ownership, control, and profits of the Amway Corporation, which manufactures soap and other products, are within the hands of a different group of people than the ownership, control, and profits of the tool businesses.
Not anymore. Now they're all integrated with the corporations.
Even if the people from whom each of those businesses makes their profits are generally the same people. So here's where we get into the theoretical structures of these organizations. Now, in 2022, thanks largely to the works of the MLM movement, most people understand that multi-level marketing operations are functionally the same as pyramid schemes. Amway takes care to stress.
This MLM is why I hate Robert Kiyosaki. I learned a lot from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But then he used his Rich Dad, Poor Dad fame to fucking partner and get licensing his name out and selling his books, all to swindle regular people.
That according to a Federal Trade Commission ruling from 1979, which I'm going to be talking about, that it is not a pyramid scheme. But the difference between what the FTC defined in that decision as a pyramid scheme in 1979 and whatever Amway is an extremely fine and technical one. The distinction is based on whether any of the products are actually sold to people outside the organization. In fact, that's a rule set by that 1979 decision that Amway has to abide by.
When I left, real estate is brutal. And then when I got into the mortgage industry, I was like, oh my God, why would anybody be a realtor when you could be a loan officer? Like, let's say maybe 10% of the population at any given time is looking to move or sell, right? Buy or sell. But the entire homeowning population and the purchasing population is a potential customer for a mortgage person. And nobody expects you to work on nights or on the weekends. But if you're a fucking realtor, somebody expects they're going to call Thursday and be like, we're flying in for the weekend. We need you to show us houses both days. We know because your time means nothing to us.
Though, only a tiny proportion of the products that Amway manufactures ever actually wind up in the hands of people outside the various Amway organizations. This is why people argue, convincingly in my view, that it is functionally the same as a pyramid scheme. In 1983, as we'll see, the Amway Corporation itself declared that the tools business is an actual pyramid scheme under the terms of that 1979 FTC decision, and that it was a blatantly illegal one. That's in the Postma memo, which I'll cover in Chapter 8. So I know I've talked a lot and it's probably a bit confusing. Here is one way to envision these businesses and their relationship. Imagine two pyramids, not exactly one nested inside the other, but they have significant overlap. One pyramid representing the Amway MLM business is much smaller than the other. The second pyramid, much larger, is the tools cult. In visual representation, it's semi-transparent because it gets noticed a lot less, or from a distance, people sometimes assume that it's a reflection or a shadow of the smaller pyramid. Although these two pyramids are symbiotic, and in fact neither can exist without the other, they are separate. They're under separate ownership.
It's not a trapezoid.
Separate leadership. The relationship between them has been historically acrimonious. They don't like each other very much, but each one recognizes the other as a necessary evil. Most discussion of Amway in the anti-MLM space focuses on the smaller, more visible pyramid, the one that relies on recruiting and which makes most of its money selling products to Amway distributors. The major questions about how much money a typical Amway distributor makes, whether the promises of income are plausible, that sort of thing, all of that focuses on that smaller pyramid. The 1979 FTC ruling, which Amway has for decades trumpeted as the seal of legality and approval, pertains solely to the smaller pyramid. Yet when people talk about Amway being a cult or cult-like, what they're really talking about is the larger pyramid, the tools cult.
Yeah, when they talk about the billions of dollars in sales now by these MLM companies, that includes all the ancillary bullshit, all the tickets.
Here's where most of the money is, and a lot of the abuses occur. It's best to describe the legality of this as untested. The tools business has not been declared legal by the FTC, nor has it been declared illegal. Even a lot of anti-MLM people assume, at least at first, that these pyramids are congruous, and that Amway is a monolithic phenomenon. They're not, and it isn't. So what is the tools business really selling? Surprisingly little, to be honest.
This is the gospel part. Like, if I buy soap, and I sell soap to you, There is an exchange of a tangible good. But tapes are and ancillaries are completely. This is why personally I didn't get into the actual weed business and I got into the ancillaries business. It's better to sell pails and shovels than it is to mine for gold. Because everybody that wants to mine for gold needs the tools to mine for gold. But only the people that find gold make any money. If you're part of the people that make the game possible, then you benefit from everybody that plays the game, win or lose.
If you've ever heard one of these tapes, you basically heard them all. There's a lot of motivational talk about envisioning your dreams, and especially fantasizing about how rich you will eventually become by being an Amway distributor. Furthermore, these tapes are often made by simply recording motivational speeches given from the stage at rallies, so it kind of resembles an Ouroboros.
That's what so he's literally saying the original tapes just recorded speeches from rallies, and I know for a fact I'd already have the tape from last year's national event, and you would buy this year's tape to the national event because it would help you recruit for the next national event.
A snake eating its own tail. The rallies themselves were and are
Yeah,
bizarre
that's what it looks like now. Look at that. All these people losing money. Every section has like 3 people making any real money on average.
Rife with pageantry and populist hysteria, at which Amway stars, the diamonds, the tool kingpins, mostly, especially Dexter Yeager, would be feted like conquering Roman emperors or rock stars. One especially fervent Yeager rally in 1980 ended with Amway
Could you call that a Jaeger bomb?
Distributors spilling out into the streets of Charlotte, North Carolina at 3 o'clock in the morning, chanting in unison, 5 and 6 nights a week, 5 and 6 nights a week. That means the number of nights that they intend to go out and draw circles for Amway. I referred to the diamonds a moment ago. Now, this is an important concept. There's a complex hierarchy of pin levels in Amway, all named after various jewels. Supposedly, as you move up in the organization and quote-unquote,
this is like a church also,
quote, go direct, meaning you've ordered enough products that you don't have to drive over to your friend's house in your AMC Pacer, but you can order directly from Amway, you might then become a pearl or a ruby or an emerald or the brass ring, diamond. It doesn't matter the exact order of the levels, but diamond is the ultimate. Well, at least it was at first, before Amway had to invent higher levels as the Kingpin's businesses grew. Amway distributors would speak in glowing terms of going diamond, which was...
I remember I used to get mad at all the fucking reps that would come in to like the real estate office. And you got mortgage rep, title reps, all these people trying to earn your business. And they'd bring in like different candies and shit. Some assholes would bring in a container of non-single wrapped licorice. Those are like a 3-week version of a bowl of bar pretzels. Like right outside of the bathroom is the front desk where you're fucking reaching in, grabbing unwrapped licorice.
It was a euphemism for financial success. When are you going diamond? As if it's a foregone conclusion, a matter of time, which the motivational psychobabble of the tools constantly reinforced. Indeed, the tools and rallies contain precious little advice.
Actually, Missy, my grandfather was a very well-respected sales and owner. And I often would have people apologize for not buying a car. Like, you can easily build enough rapport that people feel they're your friend.
On actually how to sell these products.
Because, like, if you actually give a fuck about these people and you're not just asking the questions because you're going to use it, and it's not just a tool, but like you actually care and you're given tools on how to care, it works a little different.
Usually they just talk in vague terms about how many material possessions you'll have, Cadillacs and boats and mansions and
manipulation isn't always nefarious.
Fur coats once you go diamond. But think about this, how much motivation does a soap salesperson really need? It would be one thing if the tools were actually sales advice or training, but they're not. It's just variations of what color Cadillac do you want? Despite their mostly lack of content, the tools proved highly addictive. Numerous apostates from the tools cult have reported, year after year, decade after decade, that constant exposure to tapes and rallies produced a behavior-altering effect that changed their thinking, and in many cases, emptied it. Listening to tapes recorded at rallies was intended to reproduce the euphoric effect of attending those rallies. Whenever your faith in the Amway dream faltered...
Just think about it. All these religious prosperity gospel radicals, they all have a channel, a broadcast, a television network, the Victory Network, the 700 Club, Christian Broadcasting Network, Liberty University. Like, they traffic in the same type of media narrative control that the right-wing disinformation does. They want you to be able to see them every day, all day, so that they can keep control of you and manipulate you and modify your behavior, engineering it often against your consent.
Just listen to a tape and get roped back into the fold. Soon enough, you'll be back running through the streets at 3 a.m. chanting 5 and 6 nights a week. This is why people refer to Amway as a cult. They're not really referring to the Amway Corporation, which, as you recall, sells soap and other products. They're referring to the tools business, its closed and coercive nature, and its behavior-altering effects, which have been well documented. The very vapidity and lack of substance in the tools themselves is a dead giveaway that they're not and never were actual business support materials. They're not about helping Amway distributors succeed at selling soap and other products, which over 99% of them won't anyway, regardless of circumstances. Therefore, there has to be another motive. There is. 1964. The Beatles are taking America by storm. Racial segregation is banned in the United States, at least in theory.
Yeah, when?
Lyndon Johnson is running for a full term as president, and Julie Andrews is flying across movie
Mary Poppins
on her umbrella. Also that year, a man named Dexter Yeager becomes one of the early distributors in Amway.
He looks like a young Fahrenholtz or a Gibson.
A company which at that point is really only about 5 years old. As a historian, finding the true story of Dexter Yeager's life—
This guy looks like a young Meatloaf.
—reminds me of nothing so much as researching the biographies of medieval saints. So many layers of hagiography, much of it spun by Yeager himself, surround his life story.
Here you go, Rumble. We're getting to the parts for you.
That it's almost impossible to separate fact from fiction. What we do know is that he was born in 1939 in the small town of Rome, New York, which 60 years later would become the infamous setting of Woodstock 99. But anyway, long before that, the Yeager family lived there, and they were evidently poor. Much of the hagiography that Yeager generated about himself in later life stressed this early poverty. It also emphasized the narrative that he was some sort of born salesman. He claimed that while he was in the 6th grade, that he sold bottles of soda to construction workers for a dime apiece.
This is delusional. When I was in fucking middle school, I was buying boxes of Swedish fish and bagging them up as if I did weed later, bagging them up and selling them at a profit. You know, you buy a box of like 1,000 for $5. You put 20 in a bag and sell it for 50 cents or whatever. Literally bagging up Swedish fish.
And then raised his profits by buying coke wholesale. Personally, I doubt this anecdote. I suppose it could have happened. Yeager definitely was a good salesman, but this is a classic example of the sort of born salesman origin story that was extremely popular in the culture of salespeople in the mid-20th century, especially the 1960s. Being able to say that you were a successful salesman as a kid, especially for someone who became rich in a sales profession later in life, was the entry ticket to the kind of glowing Horatio Alger story that many salespeople in this era wanted to emulate. Dexter Yeager's life story, as he often told it, was a tale of quasi-religious redemption by the light of the Amway miracle. Supposedly, he sold tools, the real kind, from Sears. He was a car salesman and a beer salesman with an outfit called the West End Brewery. And also, according to his own story, he was, once upon a time, a heavy drinker. What Yeager did not emphasize in his own
Yeager was a heavy drinker. There's just something ironic about it.
Biography was that after he became an Amway distributor in 1964, he didn't make much money at it. Despite going direct very quickly, and despite him saying, quote, "I ate, slept, and breathed the business 7 days a week," we know Yeager wasn't making money at Amway because within 3 years, he was out applying for other jobs. This is actually
I gotta credit this dude. His sourcing is phenomenal. Like, literally putting the page numbers that he's referencing.
Making money at Amway because within 3 years, he was out applying for other jobs. This is actually a pretty damning fact because this was only a couple of years after Amway really started its MLM operations. How can one of the earliest adopters of Amway not make money at it? This is evidence that the business model was already financially exhausted within about 5 years. There just wasn't enough money in, quote, the plan to sustain people with full-time incomes, something that was still the case in 1983
Yager,
when one of the tools kingpins
Yeah,
complained
pens are kind of fucked.
about that fact in a remark that was caught on tape. Then, sometime in the mid-1960s, probably 1966, someone, possibly Fred Hansen, who was apparently one of the original Amway distributors.
Who is that? The name is blocked. I just see V. I don't know who that is.
Sponsored in the 50s by Rich DeVos, but someone loaned Yeager a copy of Earl Nightingale's 1956 spoken word record, The Strangest Secret. This was the earliest motivational tape, and it was a big fad in the 1960s. Nightingale was himself inspired by Napoleon Hill.
See, I told you all these earlier. Now, Earl Nightingale partnered with somebody, Conant, to make Nightingale Conant, which published all these fucking self-help shit.
An author who wrote Think and Grow Rich in 1937, which would later be at the top of the classic Amway reading list. Napoleon Hill was in fact a con man with a long string of failed businesses, but he was riding the first wave of motivation and self-help that came out of the 1930s. This was the same cultural phenomenon that gave us Dale Carnegie's manipulative classic How to Win Friends and Influence People, which inspired, among others, Charles Manson. Another follower of Napoleon Hill was conservative evangelical preacher Norman Vincent Peale.
It always comes together.
In whose New York congregation was the Trump family. Yes, that
There you go. Hollywood.
Evangelical preacher Norman Vincent Peale.
Gary V. Yeah. It was if it was just the V, I probably would have gotten it. I know who Gary V is. I know who that fuck is. 10X. That's when I said 10X earlier. I was mocking him.
In whose New York congregation was the Trump family. Yes, that Trump.
No, I agree. Especially because Boston still plays the Capitals.
Fall 1966. The United States is now deeply and directly involved in the Vietnam War. Star Trek premieres on NBC television. And at this time, Yeager sponsors Tony Renard into Amway. Renard also has an interest in Earl Nightingale's recordings. Renard buys a secondhand tape recorder
Don't
from
be such a fucking Renard.
Yeager and then begins duplicating motivational tapes. By the late 1960s, motivational tapes are moving through Yeager's downline. At first, they're not a profit center. However, similar things are happening with other proto-MLMs. Both Holiday Magic and Coscott Interplanetary, two early multi-level marketing scams, are also beginning to develop motivational divisions. The Amway Corporation itself also has a small operation of motivational stuff. 1969, Richard Nixon becomes president, humans walk on the moon, and the aforementioned Charles Manson puts some of that Dale Carnegie energy into practice.
Yeah.
Also that year, Dexter Yeager and family, his wife Birdie and 4 kids, eventually 7, moved to
I mean, it's always bad when murderers claim you as their motivation.
Charlotte, North Carolina, probably to be closer to important people in his downline. Charlotte, as you'll see, rapidly becomes center stage of our story. 1970, a man named Bill Britt joins Amway. If you think the truth of Yeager's life is hard to pin down, Britt is even more of a black box, with virtually every mention of him in the historical record surrounded by cocoons of salesman and motivational biography. What we do know about Britt is that he served in the Army in the Korean War, and he was a minor official in a few municipal governments in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. In 1970, the year the Beatles break up and the year Nixon starts bombing Cambodia, Britt is sponsored into Amway by Dominic Coneguiliaro, whose sponsor was Dexter Yeager. These upline-downline relationships are very similar to family genealogies. Another reason why Amway organizations
mob family genealogies is more like it.
Resemble the structure of the mafia. Sometime after 1970, but probably not long after, the true origin of the tools business begins. Here are the exact words of the source that we have for this, which was written by Doug Weed, who I'll profile in Chapter 6. Quote, "Then a bright young man, who will remain nameless, changed everything. He sat across from Dexter Yeager and Bill Britt in the coffee shop of the Fontainebleau Hotel and told Yeager that for a $50,000 investment, he could buy the latest machinery and set up his own tape duplicating company. Dexter turned him down. Britt said, 'I'll do it.' And so the modern networking tape business was born." End quote. Who was the bright young man who shall remain nameless? We don't know. It could theoretically have been Weed himself. He did sometimes talk about himself that way, but Weed was only 24 in 1970, and by most accounts, he didn't meet Dexter Yeager until later in the 70s. So the identity of this person who was there at the inception of the tools business remains unknown. But the point is that by this time, 1970 or 71, somebody, this nameless person, had noticed that there was enough profit potential in the tools themselves to offer a significant return on a $50,000 investment. $50,000 in 1970 is about $371,000 in today's money. This was also the time that cassette tapes were becoming ubiquitous. It all lines up. So Britt begins manufacturing tapes on a mass basis, and Yeager begins distributing them throughout his downlines. Britt seems to have offered Yeager a sweetheart deal on producing tapes for wholesale. Within a few
That's
Short
exactly
years, they
what they
both
look
grow
like
very
when I
rich
got 'em.
and highly influential in the
Exactly.
Amway organization. So now, for at least this small
Even the
group of
same
men,
color
principally Bill Britt, Dexter Yeager, and the nameless young man, the central problem of the Amway business, which is that you can't
we assume the nameless young man is white?
make any real money at it, has been
Maybe he was orange.
solved. Based on the work of self-help grifters like Dale Carnegie, Napoleon Hill, Norman Vincent Peale, and Earl Nightingale, they've discovered an entirely new and fabulously lucrative income stream to replace the largely illusory income that they should have been earning from recruiting people to sell Amway products. Was this discovery an accident? We can't know because there are so few primary sources. But it may not have come entirely out of left field. The Amway Tools cult, as it developed, is fairly unique, but it bears some significant similarities to other motivational organizations and ideologies that were developing around this same time. Organizations that were also likened to cults. That is where we turn next.
Unknown Mayo. What up, stickers? Unknown Mayo.
In 1964, the same year that Dexter Yeager got into Amway, a man named William Penn Patrick founded a cosmetics sales company called Holiday Magic, Inc. Using the Amway multi-level marketing model, Patrick sold distributorships in Holiday Magic, which was one of the early and infamous multi-level marketing pyramid schemes. But even the sale of distributorships and cosmetics eventually took
the idea. A lot of these MLMs, the pitch is you already buy makeup, you already buy soap, you already buy the products we sell, and you give the profit to some random company. All you've got to do is change which products you use over to buying from your own company and have some of your friends change some of their products that they already use to help you out, and you're gold.
a backseat to Patrick's true business, which was selling motivation. In 1967, Patrick founded Leadership Dynamics, a for-profit company that pioneered the technique of large group awareness training. Patrick also had a financial stake in a similar company called Mind Dynamics.
Anything can become a DUI checkpoint if you run into it.
Which had been founded by his mentor, Alexander Everett. The ideology of these groups was highly similar.
Look. Look.
Mind Dynamics, which had been founded by his
Agent Smith. Oh, so funny.
mentor, Alexander Everett. The ideology of these groups was highly similar to the kind of motivational material made popular by Earl Nightingale, Dexter Yeager's spiritual mentor. Mind Dynamics was also referred to as a cult, subjecting its members to humiliation, verbal and physical abuse, and even being locked into coffins. This company was the subject of a notorious 1972
Oh my God, it's Dana White's new fucking league.
book-length expose. While in the meantime, Holiday Magic was being prosecuted by the state of California, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the FTC for being an illegal pyramid scheme. These companies shut down after Patrick's death in 1973. The story of William Penn Patrick illustrates an early connection between multi-level marketing and ultra-conservatism. Patrick...
Okay, so this is finally, we had to do all of that, okay, to get to the beginning of the serious merger between these values, their upbringing, and how you see a lot of these same behaviors in the modern day religious right-wing movements, but you also see it from the right-wing media, the right-wing politicians, all the smaller content creators. This is all duplicated over and over and over again. Napoleon Hill, sexual, I don't know it.
Was a member of the infamous John Birch Society, which has also been likened to a cult. This is a far-right organization that believes in a worldwide communist conspiracy. The modern conspiracy theory cult, QAnon, has a lot of intellectual roots, if you can call them that, in common with the John Birch Society. John Schaefer, the former lead singer of heavy metal band Iced Earth, who went to prison for his participation in the January 6th...
Iced Earth. So... Schaefer, because of certain circumstances with Stuart Rhodes, I think it was, he was like a leader that day, even though, like, I think he got scapegoated a little bit into being a leader.
2021 insurrection at the Capitol told the media that his...
Look at the fucking cross. That is a cross, right? Modern day Christianity attacking the Capitol.
Anti-government views were heavily shaped by his father, who had been a longtime member of the John Birch Society. But anyway, back to the motivational cults of the 60s and 70s. For a time, an employee of William Penn Patrick's Holiday Magic scheme was one Glenn W. Turner.
Isn't there something funny, ironic about white supremacists always being the victim? How can you be the supremacist and the victim always? We're better than everybody else and should be in charge, but also we're getting our ass whooped by them.
Who went on to found his own multi-level marketing pyramid, the infamous Coscott Interplanetary Inc. Coscott, like Holiday Magic, ostensibly also sold cosmetics. The name was apparently meant to reference both the word cosmetics and Florida's soon-to-be-built City of the Future, Epcot Center, with the word interplanetary added to give it a futuristic feel. In 1969, the year Dexter Yeager moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, Turner founded a company called Dare to be Great, Inc., with an exclamation point. Based in Orlando, the home territory of Epcot Center, then in the early stages of development.
Rumble, and I guess everybody else, but Rumble, American intelligence media, aim for truth. All of the networks are given these patriotic, pro-American, pro-free speech. Like, it always is wrapped in the flag. Their hatred and their disinformation is either wrapped in the Bible or wrapped in the flag. It's almost like all their crosses have points at the top.
Dare to be Great, exclamation point, sold a series of self-motivation courses provided mostly on cassette tapes.
Yeah.
The courses were graduated and increasingly more expensive, from Adventure Roman numeral 1 to Adventure Roman numeral 4. The resemblance to Scientology's
I'm learning.
Operating Thetan levels is probably not a coincidence, but to get through all...
Hail Thetan. So I can't tell you how many of these I still have. I know exactly where they are too. I have boxes of no procrastination tapes, never be lied to again tapes, the power of positive thinking, Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar. Like, I still have them.
The courses were graduated and increasingly more expensive, from Adventure Roman...
That's what I remember hearing, is they had a lot of fake channels.
Numeral 1 to Adventure Roman numeral 4. The resemblance to Scientology's operating Thetan levels is probably not a coincidence, but to get through all four would cost the customer $8,000, the equivalent of over...
Yeah, and also McGibbon.
$61,000 in today's money. What was the basic message of all these expensive adventure courses bellowed to the customer on tapes in Glenn W. Turner's classic Southern twang? Well, here's a quote from one of them. Quote, "All things are possible to him who believes. What does it take to be a success? Believing in yourself. Making
If you think you can't, or you think you can, you're right.
$1 million was easy. What was the hardest thing in the world? Believing I could do it." End quote. If this sounds remarkably like the message Dexter Yeager began pushing only a few years later, it should. Glenn W. Turner amassed a fortune of $150 million selling...
If you think it and believe it, you can achieve it.
Dare to be Great, exclamation point, on the multi-level pyramid model. It didn't last. Coscott Interplanetary was driven out of business by the FTC in 1975 for being, you guessed it, an illegal pyramid scheme. But not before tarring celebrity lawyer F. Lee Bailey, the lawyer...
It's so funny how these people come up over and over again.
They're later was partially responsible for freeing double murderer O.J. Simpson. Bailey was indicted on conspiracy charges related to Coscott Interplanetary, together with Glenn Turner, in 1973.
I saw that, Anonymous Patriot. I did see that. I did see that. Some of it is hard to keep the time frames in line.
In a hung jury. Turner eventually went to prison in 1987 for running a different pyramid scheme. He died...
No, on his own stuff. On the AIM network, the AIM for Truth, or Americans for Innovation.
In 2020. So why is this any of this relevant?
And what they would do is they would do... AIM would quote AFI, and they were the same people. And it's exactly the spread of misinformation. One source makes it up. The same person under another name covers it like it's news, and then the same person under another name verifies that it's real because these two other people that don't really exist and are all one person said it was true.
To the Amway Tools cult. Well, several reasons. First, the Coscott experience in particular demonstrates that there was significant profit potential in selling motivation as a commodity, particularly in the medium of cassette tapes, and seminars and rallies too, both of which Holiday Magic and Coscott also had. There's a natural affinity, for whatever reason, between multi-level marketing, multi-level pyramid marketing and motivational material that often has a cult-like effect. Second, the connections between motivational cults, multi-level marketing, and far-right politics are also evident in the stories of these early multi-level marketing schemes. Nearly all of the Tools cult kingpins would turn out to be conservative evangelical Republicans, especially Dexter Yeager, which has far-reaching consequences, as we'll see in Chapter 11. Third, so long as we're talking about connections, there are numerous layers of connections between these organizations and others in what you might call the human potential movement of the 1970s.
Yeah,
These included
I saw the one thing where it had all the other links.
Erhard Seminars Training, or EST, as it was called, founded by Werner Erhard, who was involved in Mind Dynamics, the sister corporation of Holiday.
Mind Dynamics. Do you see what this becomes? Do you see how it took individuals like Norman Vincent Peale and Dale Carnegie and even into the 70s, you had Wayne Dyer with Your Erroneous Zones. Like all of this culminates into the science of behavioral modification, into marketing, into programming. Like this is like the new age beginning of social engineering.
Magic. While it seems bizarre now, for a time the Church of Scientology was popularly believed to be a part of this movement. And this stuff was everywhere in the 70s. Est even showed up in the 1978 musical film The Wiz, the all-black remake of The Wizard of Oz. This ideology was...
Well, I only started looking at so what happened, the origin story of this channel, which was in response to what I was seeing, it was a way for me to secretly do this.
You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Wait a minute. Alternative facts? Alternative facts.
Well, that's so silly because it's somebody's version of the truth, not the truth.
Truth is truth. I don't mean to go like...
No, it isn't truth. Truth isn't truth. The President of the United States says, I didn't...
Truth isn't truth. Mr. Mayor, do you realize what...
So, I was watching... While I was researching started as researching January 6th, ended up becoming... what the fuck a coup was and all the different players and all this. And so, yeah, exactly. So facts based on my brain. Anything based on my brain is an opinion, but it's a funny way to use the word fact to mean opinion because that's what they're doing. Look, it's objective truth. You mean the Bible, the story you chose to believe in, is objective truth. And this is the bastardization of language. So there was a whole play on it. And all the first videos I made were like 2-minute videos because I was watching people like Destiny, Vosh do debates. And they were like trying to convince radicals with facts. And it was nonsense. It's like when I was younger, I created a test of if it's worth talking to a religious person about religion. And like before I would have the conversation, I was like, hey, do you believe in heaven and hell? If they said yes, I would ask them what heaven looks like. If they could describe what heaven looks like, there was no sense having the conversation because it wasn't going to be a conversation. It was a dystopian version of them where anything that could be said is squeezed to fit into their ideology. And therefore, it doesn't have to make any sense. So facts and logic, they don't exist anymore. And that's literally where we are as a country for a huge swath. And so getting to a point where, this isn't real. And being able to understand for them it is real. And that you need to understand their world and what is real to be able to help them. So all my first videos were like how to talk to a Republican And it was just taking their logic and giving it to them. Like, that you don't believe in abortion. Life begins at conception. Well, how come Jesus's birth is Christmas on the day he was born, not the day he was conceived? If life begins at conception, why didn't you celebrate Jesus then? How old am I when I'm born? 9 months or 0? And the stupid things that are just language tricks, because that's all they do is language. Destiny before Vosh, back in the blood sports era. See, I had to go research everything that I know. Isn't because I was involved. It was because of research. And did they ever find Gary Eppie's wife? Hashtag find Gary Eppie's wife. Find Mama J.
Ported into the production by Diana Ross, who was a fervent follower of Werner Erhard. And the final reason why this is relevant, several former Coscott distributors eventually joined Amway, and some apparently became tools called kingpins. The reason we know this is because Coscott is mentioned casually on the Miami Showdown tape from 1983, demonstrating that the kingpins were fully aware of it. If you recall the main thread of our story, before we got into the digression of holiday magic, Coscott Interplanetary, and the other motivational cults of the 70s, Dexter Yeager and Bill Britt had struck it big in the tape business after a fateful meeting sometime in 1970 or 1971 at Miami Beach's Fontainebleau Hotel, an equally fateful location as we'll see. And at this meeting, a quote-unquote young man who will remain nameless suggested to Britt that he invest $50,000 in the tape duplicating business. The source for that account was one Douglas Weed, spelled W-E-A-D, who is a fascinating chameleon-like...
Yeah, you did tell me that. That's funny. I found Vosh. Back when Hippy Dippy was on, I enjoyed panels.
Figure weaving
and
his way.
And then I realized they made individual content.
In and out of this story. It's worth taking a few minutes to explain who Doug Weed was, because he's the glue that connects so many aspects of this story. Amway, the tools kingpins, the religious right, the Republican Party, and a certain prominent political family, from which 2 of our recent U.S. presidents have come. Doug Weed, now deceased, was your quintessential boomer. He was born in Indiana in 1946, a lifelong Pentecostal and Assemblies of God preacher. Weed started to become prominent as a motivational speaker in the mid-1970s, which is apparently how he came to the attention of various Amway personalities, including Dexter Yeager. Weed was employed by Yeager as his assistant, press agent, and ghostwriter. They co-authored numerous motivational books that were pushed out as tools to Amway distributors. And Weed probably wrote the first book under Yeager's byline, the 1978 classic, Don't Let Anybody Steal Your Dream. I
saw the Indiana Jones part.
Book in preparation for making this video. It is
in fact,
absolute...
the funny thing, Rumble, is right above the Indiana Jones thing, it said to Kevin, who's playing the glass bead game, or it said from Kevin, who's playing the glass bead game. And it absolutely looked like something I would have said. And it took me a few minutes to be like, okay, no, this is just part of the website.
Nothing burger in terms of content, but it is completely reflective of the cultic style of tapes and rallies, which was big business by that time. Doug Weed, in fact, was the person who coined the phrase compassionate capitalism, which was later used by Amway corporate co-founder Rich DeVos as the title
of... you got to think about all the people that you're talking about. You don't see Rumblefish somehow? You mean Aiken? Oh, because Aiken is Rumblefish. Sorry, I just... it's just easier. It's almost like I'm anti-trans to Aiken because I will only accept one identity.
His 1994 book, which incidentally was marketed heavily to Amway distributors. You may recall that phrase, compassionate capitalism, because it resurfaced 6 years later as a major theme of George W. Bush's 2000.
This fucking guy right here. What a piece of shit.
Presidential campaign. That is the influence that Doug Weed eventually had on the Republican Party. So how did he get that influence? Well, by 1980, Weed was wired into the Republican Party establishment and vice versa, through the channel of Amway and Dexter Yeager. Weed wrote a quickie biography of Ronald Reagan titled Reagan in Pursuit of the Presidency. The book is dedicated to, this should come as no surprise, Dexter Yeager. Yeager, in fact, brought then candidate...
that didn't just happen, Meatbag, and how are you doing? Corcoran left like a week ago, and he's a witness. Cheney to hell, yeah.
Reagan to speak at a massive Amway rally on Yeager's home turf in Charlotte, North Carolina in the late summer of 1980. Weed was apparently not yet an Amway distributor at that time, but he became one in or around 1981 when Ronald Reagan entered the White House. Reagan brought with him to the White House, or at least to Blair House, former Texas oil man and Republican Party chairman George Bush. That would be Bush the First, whom Reagan didn't like very much and with whom he frequently clashed in the early days of the 1980 campaign. Somehow, Weed became close to the Bush family, and at one point reported both to the elder Bush and the younger one, the then vice president's son. Weed was unquestionably a tools cult kingpin. As we'll see in Chapter 9, he was present, again at the Miami Beach Fontainebleau Hotel, at the showdown meeting in April 1983 between the tools cult kingpins and Amway corporate representatives. We know that Weed was there because his voice is on the tape. However, Weed did not actually work at the White House until Bush the First got there in 1989 in his own right. Weed apparently gave
Look how fucking tied in these fuckers are. Look how tied in these assholes are.
up his Amway distributorship at that time and then served as the conduit between the religious right and the Bush family. He was cashiered from the White House in 1990 when he objected to Bush inviting LGBT activists to the White House to the signing of a federal hate crimes bill. Though Weed insisted he was not personally homophobic, gee, where have we heard that one before, his opposition to soiling the sacred White House with gay people earned him significant cachet with the homophobic wing of the Republican Party. 2 years later, Weed popped up in Arizona, running for a newly created U.S. congressional seat. He won the Republican nomination, but then the elder statesman of Arizona Republican politics, retired Senator and former 1964 presidential candidate Barry Goldwater, shocked the state by endorsing
no fucking surprise, Goldwater's from Arizona.
Weed's Democratic opponent instead of him. She went on to win. Weed insisted that it was about abortion, but there might have been something else going on here. Goldwater was notoriously skeptical of the religious right, as he stated in no uncertain terms in 1994 when he warned that if and when preachers...
The only thing I'll say about G-dubs, is there anybody that didn't at least find a spot for him in their heart when he dodged the shoe? You think Trump could dodge a shoe? It would hit Trump in the face, and then he would say, no shoe, no shoe, perfect dodge.
got control of the Republican Party, quote, it's going to be a terrible damn problem. And
Bush actually dodged the shoe. Trump would get hit in the face and blame the shoe.
Quote. So with his own career in elected office apparently scotched, Weed went on to advise the Bush family, and particularly Bush II. This eventually got him into some hot water. Weed secretly taped phone conversations between himself and George W. Bush, while the latter was still governor of Texas. In 2005, when Bush II was president, Weed released these tapes, which he thought were made legally, but some of the revelations on them angered various conservatives and annoyed the Bushes themselves. Ironic, isn't it, that the man so prominent in the hierarchy of a cult that holds its members in sway through the use of cassette tapes is himself brought down by tapes. Now persona non grata in the Bush camp.
Yeah, he didn't like, somebody makes a noise at a Trump rally and like Trump backs up and Secret Service runs up there. That dude threw a second shoe before Secret Service reacted. Bush was like half ninja that day. He's just like, whoa. He fucking neoed. He was like, whoosh, whoosh. That shoe was moving in slow motion.
Weed went on to advise another political family, that being the Pauls, Father Ron and son Rand, and he went on to write several books on presidential...
You see how absolutely tied in these fucks are?
...history, none of which, in my opinion as a historian, are any good at all. It's unfortunate that Weed is the only source we have, or at least the one that I've been able to find, for that early critical 1970s meeting between Yeager, Britt, and the bright young man. While I believe that the factual matters that Weed attests to in this account are probably correct, he is a bit unreliable because of his spin. The reporting on Weed, particularly Ward Harkavi's series of stories, which I linked earlier in the footnote, makes clear that he was famously a chameleon, not wanting to say anything to offend anybody, and not above sandbagging the truth to that end. I discovered the origin story of the Tools cult in writings on Weed's blog, dated 2004. This is a time when he was arguing online with various anti-MLM commenters. Weed's take on the whole phenomenon was basically the tools are valuable, but there's a few bad apples that have corrupted the whole system. That's a common defense of the Tools cult.
Now, the hard thing about this is there are benefits and value to these tricks, these tools. Like, if people knew more about them and understood how the mind works and how to motivate themselves, they can do more. They can, like, work to prosper in ways that you might not without them. Because they are effective. Like, that's the thing. The reason you give the tapes and they work to radicalize you in the cult is because the fucking tapes work. So, like, the stuff does work to a degree, but it's not, it's just like the manosphere stuff where working out bettering yourself isn't like the only thing. Talking about body count or hating women isn't like they've taken these tools and motivations and then they've co-opted them. And this is something you see with QAnon and Pizzagate with Save the Children and how they co-opted that, how they co-opted the anti-vax movement, how they co-opted yoga moms and crystal mommies with the naturopathy stuff in the anti-vax. Like you see this co-opting of thing after thing after thing where they find a motivating factor which also has a corresponding personality like makeup, psychological makeup, and a larger portion of people in these groups are predisposed to conspiracy or manipulation or like feeling that there's a solution that other people know that you don't know, and you want to be like part of this is how people fall for pyramid schemes. It's how they fall for Ponzi schemes, investment scams, Nigerian princess, romance scams. It's all the same.
Particularly among those who are unwilling to condemn the Amway system as a whole.
There's a reason why the like Nigerian prince scam letters are not written in proper English. Why the emails are not written in proper English. Because if you're swayed by the bad language, you're less manipulatable. So they want people that are still going to make the phone call when they write it in ESL, when they make spelling errors, grammar errors, sentence structure errors. When it's obvious that it's a scam to somebody like me, when somebody else calls, they've already weeded out so many people they'd have to go through to get to a success.
I was never going to say publicly anything that wasn't generally laudatory of Amway and multi-level marketing. The unreliability of Doug Weed as a source is similar to doing medieval or ancient history, where there is one or only a handful of sources about a particular battle or event or reign, and all of the sources are unreliable or problematic. So as a historian, when confronted with the situation, you have to kind of read between the lines to arrive at some reasonable conclusion of what actually happened. So with that out of the way, let's get back to the story of the Tools cult and their epic battle with the Amway Corporation, which reached a peak in 1983.
Well, but there's a lot of poverty there too. Like in Jamaica, it was so bad, they had a whole government campaign of like we had Don't Do Drugs. They had Stop the Scamming.
1975. Saigon falls to the North Vietnamese. Steven Spielberg's Jaws makes a generation of Americans afraid to go swimming. President Gerald Ford is shot at by Squeaky Fromm, a member of the Manson family, who was recruited using Dale Carnegie's manipulation techniques. And also in this year, the Amway Corporation begins its epic...
And Nigerians are both rich and, like, normally super cool. Like, way more rounded thought-wise, I think.
Losing battle with the Federal Trade Commission, a battle in which its survival as a company is at stake.
But most any Nigerian I would know here in America probably comes from a family that can afford to come to America.
By now, the FTC was on a roll.
It's like a model minority type thing with Jews, too.
Having lined up and shot down one multi-level marketing scam after another. They'd killed Holiday Magic and Coscott Interplanetary dog dead. And now they had their eyes on the biggest steer on the ranch, Amway, the OG MLM. Amway execs Rich DeVos and Jay Van Andel had every reason to be concerned. Holiday Magic and Coscott had both been...
So, think about this, right? There is a religious basis to all of this, a religious background, a religious connection, a conservative connection, and it may be as petty as being mad the government came after you. Like, a lot of these origin stories are people that were scamming and the government came after them. And now they want to use their anger at the government and the people that came after them for power to oppress them in retribution. Trump, I am your retribution. Look at Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon in 2007, he gets fucked over by the gamers and the government. So what does he do? He's anti-government and weaponizes gamers. It's just rooted in like revenge, retribution in the name of God, selfishness, where you use God to accomplish your personal agenda.
A little more brazen in their get-rich-quick representations. But aside from that, it was difficult for Amway to distinguish its basic pyramid-shaped business model from theirs. But the Amway suits did have a secret weapon that Holliday and Coscott did not have, the President of the United States. Before Gerald Ford had the slightest inkling that he might one day be president...
Bannon trial for what? An appeal? How does he even get granted an appeal?
He was the longtime Republican congressman from Grand Rapids, Michigan, right next door to Amway founder's hometown.
You could have somebody convicted of murder with no evidence, no DNA, and inept cops, and they won't take up that fucking appeal.
Of Ada. Ford.
You got to free him 20 years later on DNA with the Innocence Project. But Bannon will give, and Bannon, like an appeal for violating a fucking congressional subpoena.
Only got the top job because Nixon's VP, Spiro Agnew, resigned during a bribery scandal. And according to the newly passed 25th Amendment, Nixon nominated and Congress approved a new vice president, and Ford was his choice. Then Nixon himself...
Well, he was sentenced and didn't have to serve his sentence. He lost his trial. He was sentenced. And they were like, oh, we'll allow you to stay out on appeal.
Himself had his last day in the final wave on the steps of
So he's literally doing like we need a civil war while out on appeal after being convicted.
Won as a result of the Watergate scandal. And suddenly, Grand Rapids' own congressman was in the White House. DeVos and
Soft on crime Republicans.
Vandal wasted no time exploiting their connection to Ford. They visited him privately in the White House. The notes from that conversation, if there ever were any, have never surfaced, but we know for a fact that they were there. In 1979, after 4 years of litigation, the infamous decision in Re Amway Corporation was issued. If you ever want to hear a lengthy dissertation on this decision, just tell an MLM Hunbot that you think their outfit is a pyramid scheme. Then pull out a stopwatch and see how many seconds before they invoke the 1979 Amway decision as supposed proof of the legality of multi-level marketing. I'm fortunately going to spare you that lengthy diatribe, but I will say that I believe the Amway FTC decision, which declared that Amway is not a pyramid scheme, even though it pretty much is mischaracterized in anti-MLM circles. It was not the surprise ringing endorsement of Amway that it's often made out to be. The decision was a functional...
So the radical, conservative, evangelical grifters, con men, took a court ruling and lied about what it actually said to create a lore that isn't what happened. They've been doing this forever. Like the fact that people blame Trump, the fact that people focus on Trump, ignores the 50 years of the project they've been running.
Victory for Amway, in that it kept them alive, and it specified certain safe harbor conditions, fig leaves mostly, that if they abide...
Yeah, it's legal for Trump to sell his fucking NFTs and sneakers, and it's legal for... I don't even think it is legal. I think it's wire fraud when he raises money on a stolen election.
...by them would theoretically keep the company from getting broken up as an illegal pyramid scheme. In reality, though, there's evidence that the Amway suits understood that what they had really done, all they had really done, was to fight the FTC to a draw. If they crossed the...
So this is, you think about it, these conservative evangelicals, they want to deregulate the government. Why? Because the government held them accountable for their regulation. That's why Elon wants to dismantle the government in America. Because the Americans are like, we heard you were being racist at your plant. What do you have to say? Well, if the plant shuts down, it'll be your fault for calling me racist.
The very thin line that the FTC had drawn around their legal operations, the assault could be renewed again at any time. This may have been...
In fact, I think it was either McKibben or Douglas who sued the military in 2015 and lost. and then was like super anti-government. Like, I feel like a lot of these ex-military that joined together, like Flynn and Ezra Cohen Watnick and Raikkonen and all these fucks, right? He will. He probably already is. But he bought Twitter so that he doesn't have to give dictators money. He gives them access to control the narrative. It was a brilliant move by a socialist. And by socialist, I mean somebody that has their hand out for government money and contracts all the time in their whole career.
The deal, explicitly or implicitly, that the suits worked out with Ford during that mysterious White House meeting in 1975. Or there might not have been a deal at all. We may never know. But the Amway Corporation continued to fear and dread the FTC for years afterward. So clearly they did not interpret the decision as a permanent absolution. Now that point becomes important later on. In the meantime, the tools cult kingpins were getting very, very rich in the later 1970s. They quickly became a very insular group. Less than 2% of Amway distributors participate in the profits from the tools business, and 98% are never even told that major profits were being made in that business.
No, it's not about, you're missing the point. Elon Musk promoting disinformation on his platform that comes from cat turd by amplifying pro-Trump Russian disinformation, but like he controls the algorithm. So like what I mean is Elon isn't working with Trump directly, okay? The way George Carlin says, you don't need a grand conspiracy when people's goals converge. You don't need Elon talking directly to Trump to understand the dynamic of Elon being valuable to the disinformation right. You know what I mean? Like their objectives align like RFK and Trump.
The kingpins could keep their club closed and insular by picking and choosing who was allowed.
It's like when there's gas stations across the street from each other. If you worked together without working together and you agreed we're not going to undercut each other's price, in fact, for the next month, why don't we play a little game? I'll raise my price by $1, and then you raise it $1 more than that. And then I'll raise mine $1 more than that. And then you raise yours $1 more than that. Well, not $1, but you get the point. Pretty soon, those two gas stations can work together to be 20, 40 cents above market rate. Because of the geographic location, they can price fix. This is how it works. And you don't need to coordinate it when your interests align.
To quote unquote go diamond. They did this through transfers among themselves of the points that conferred Amway pin levels. By transferring points and creating or destroying new diamond distributors and their associated line.
Well, and then you got OPEC, which controls the global supply, which obviously affects the price
of business. The kingpins could effectively make the ownership of the tools business sort of a walled garden, with only a choice group of insiders admitted to share its riches. Dexter Yeager was the biggest of the kingpins. He had the largest volume of Amway business of anybody. So how rich was Dexter Yeager? In 1980, the heyday of the tools business, Yeager had a mansion outside Charlotte to which Amway distributors...
That guy looks like he's done acid a bunch.
...locked as a pilgrimage site, literally. He had a collection of Rolls Royces, a collection of yachts, a coach, a bus, basically, that he used to transport himself ostentatiously to rallies, such as the immense...
Look, think about revivals. Think about traveling ministries. Like how Olstein had his origin. Like putting your family on the bus and going to shill at church to church to church. Or a traveling revival like a fucking circus. You come to town, you infiltrate. It's like There Will Be Blood. Like, it's the same insidious nature as the MLM, as the snake oil salesman.
Free Enterprise Days held at a sports arena in Charlotte. This is the rally where people broke into the streets chanting 5 and 6 nights a week. Now, all these trappings of prosperity, this is all part of the false
I used to go to Greensboro and Miami.
Image of success posed by the tapes and rallies themselves. It was all about material wealth. Notice that the message of the tools is never reflective or transformative. It's never get rich so you can go find some meaning in your life, or get rich and go to Nepal to find spiritual enlightenment or anything like that. It's always, here's the coach, boat, mansion, fur coat, whatever. This is the meaning in life. No deeper reflection required. This evidently reflected Dexter Yeager's personal view of wealth and accomplishment. Note how this is also exactly the vision of wealth that comes out of prosperity gospel preachers like the Osteen family. But the Tools kingpins were very careful to promote the impression, not explicitly but implicitly, to promote the impression that their wealth came.
Don't forget, Trump's spiritual advisor in the White House was like Queen of the Evangelicals, Paula White. Angels from Africa.
From selling Amway products and recruiting distributors, not the tools business. The message was, if you work hard at Amway, again universally referred to as the business, you too will own the coach, boat, mansion, and fur coats once you go diamond.
When you drive up in your brand new coach, flashing the jewelry, your wife in a new fur coat, you'll know why you work so hard. You'll know why you're diamond.
Anecdotally, it was common lore among rank-and-file Amway distributors that one of the talking points was Amway produced more millionaires than any other business. Now, that is patently and quantifiably nonsense, of course, but it's a lie that's necessary to tell the distributors to keep them hooked. The truth, that any money that's made in Amway comes mostly from the tools cult, has to be carefully hidden. Even a couple of minutes' logical reflection can deflate Amway's implicit promise of fabulous wealth. Realistically, how many soap millionaires can there be in America? And how can there be so many people who routinely get so rich selling a product that isn't even available in retail stores? The tools kingpins were very careful to keep people from asking these sorts of questions. The reality, of course, was that there were no soap millionaires, but there were tools.
It is funny. I've always wanted money, but not for the stuff. Like, I don't dream of a big house or fancy shit. Like, the car I bought, I never in a million years would have thought to buy. Never. But like it all stems from the same, this like baby boomer capitalism where your worth is decided by your wealth and your fucking properties, your property. See, if they get you to spend your money on dumb shit, then you can't create wealth.
Tools cult millionaires. By 1990, Dexter Yeager was pulling in $30 million a year, and the vast majority of it came from tools. He flaunted his wealth by wearing diamond rings, a Rolex, and a bracelet spelling out his name in diamonds. Yeager had by now set up a corporation, Freedom, wearing diamond rings, a Rolex.
You see the book, Creating Heaven on Earth, Jim Baker and the Birth of a Sunbelt Pentecostalism.
And a bracelet spelling out his name in diamonds. Yeager had by now set up a corporation, Freedom Distributing, which was the financial hub.
Freedom Distributing. It's always this play on their anti-government, anti-establishment, which makes them the real Americans. Because they want to create this dynamic of words where they mean the opposite. Only real patriots want to take down the government.
Of his tools business. That company later in the 80s became Internet Services Corporation, and eventually his motivational tape empire spewed its cultic rantings, many of them from Yeager's own speeches at rallies, into all 50 states and 10 foreign countries. The enormous growth of the tools cult reached its apex during the time that the Amway Corporation was distracted by...
And I think, Severed, I think my theory is the limitations on people's thinking into the future, like how far into the future they can think, right, is limited to how far into the future they can go without having to look at their bank account. Like, if you got to look at your bank account every day or every other day, how do you think more than a month at a time? You can't. It's hard to think a week at a time, let alone a month at a time. But if you don't have to look at your bank account to figure out if you can buy something for the next year, you can think 5 to 10 years out. Because you have the freedom to do that. Like, you're not thinking in how do I make money today? You're thinking in how do I build from here? There's a total different realistic expectation of what is perceivably possible based on your bank account.
Their long battle with the Federal Trade Commission. The historical evidence, particularly the Postma memo, supports the inference that the Amway suits were surprised by how big and how pervasive the tools business had become, dwarfing by many times the revenues made by selling Amway manufactured products to distributors. Or perhaps the suits did know or suspected, but chose to ignore the problem for as long as possible. If they did ignore it, you can understand why. After all, Yeager, Britt, and their associated downlines accounted for the lion's share of the Amway Corporation's profits. The real nature of Yeager's business was selling tapes, books, and rally tickets. The Amway Corporation didn't get a piece of that, but what revenue they did get could exist only so long as the tools kingpins, the diamonds, kept their downlines hooked on motivational tapes. Then, finally, events forced Amway
See, like, here's an example. The tools business and Amway aren't on the same team, but they're completely symbiotic. Like, Amway can't exist without the tools, and the tools can't exist without Amway. But they're not coordinating, but they're in collusion.
To pull its head out of the sand. 1982. Ronald Reagan, having been shot by Hinckley the year before, has finally recovered. Michael Jackson is shattering all-time records with the Thriller album. Margaret Thatcher decides to fight for what tiny ice-encrusted scraps of the British Empire remain above water in the Falklands War. And 1982 is a terrible, terrible year for the Amway Corporation. Sales are slowing down. The press is increasingly abuzz with negative stories about Amway, especially its dissatisfied ex-distributors who keep talking about how weird and culty it is. One of these is Phil Kearns, author of Fake It Till You Make It, the first book-length expose of Amway and the...
I can't tell you how many thousands of times I've heard Fake It Till You Make It.
Tools cult. Kearns, a former...
You said so interesting as to... What?
Distributor, ironically once co-authored a book with none other than Doug Weed. It was about the People's Temple, the suicide cult that resulted in over 900 deaths in Guyana in November 1978. But what really draws the ire of the...
Jim Jones was called the People's Temple?
Amway suits is increasingly brazen behavior by some of the tools cult kingpins, or wannabe kingpins. Sometime in late 1982, a West Coast distributor named Leonard Hall goes rogue. Now, I know very little about Leonard Hall, but what we do know, mostly from the Miami Showdown tape, speaks for itself. Hall apparently saw the money being made in the tools cult and tried to make a grab for some of it. Although the majority of Amway distributors were wired into Yeager's group, not all of them were, and the tools were not ubiquitous in everybody's downline. So Hall may have sensed an opportunity and tried to make a bid to build a system, a mini tools cult, of his own, to cash in on the distributors who weren't already addicted to Yeager's tools. He went up and down the California coast, poaching distributors.
So now you got fucking... now you got the factions. So not only will the government be the enemy, but the other people doing what I'm doing are the enemy also. This is how rhinos became rhinos.
To join his line and thus getting them hooked on tools.
Yeah, Missy, when I know somebody's starting a business, I want to help them, but I start by going through a business plan. If you won't do the business plan, you won't do anything else.
This is the ultimate sin in the Amway universe. It's called cross-lining. If we go back to the analogy of Amway being structured...
I used to like fucking with business owners. When you'd have a small business owner opening some sort of new business, a restaurant, a fucking confections, a knick-knack store. My favorite question was, so you're opening a business. I'm curious, how does your business end? And they just look at you like, what? What? And I'm like, yeah, you're opening a business. How does it end? Like, what's the goal? What are you just going to own it and run it for the rest of your life? Or like, what are you trying to do? You want to sell it? You like what? And they're like, oh, I never thought of it. I'm like, you want to own a job. You don't want to own a business. Like, you start a business because like you have a reason. Like, you open a bakery because you don't want to work for the fucking person that owns the other bakery.
Kind of like the mafia. Cross-lining is like gangsters from one leg of the family going into business with another separate branch. This would be viewed by the Don as an act of disloyalty, and in any event, it would screw up the sanctity of the financial arrangements in the separate lines, which are insulated from each other, so if any one of them goes down, it won't affect the others. So for this reason, cross-lining...
Do you like, my grandfather and my father are the perfect, like, polar examples. My grandfather, for 40 some years, owned a high-end custom kitchen and bath company. They did remodels in, like, nice houses, all custom cabinetry made in the warehouse and shit. But it was like my grandfather and two other people. My grandfather did all the sales, and when he was done, so was the business. There's nothing left. He worked into his 80s, and then he sells off the machinery and the van, and that's it. But when you build a saleable business where your direct contribution to the day-to-day operations are relatively minimal, and it makes money without you being the driver, and all the systems are in place and the customers are in place, you have a saleable product. Fuck, when I left college and I quit selling weed, I sold my weed customers for like $500 and some weed. I will give you and make contacts with all my customers for you, but this is what I want in return. I built a saleable product. But if all you're doing is a glorified job, that's fine. But that's like a small plumber, a small roofer who him and his buddy do roofing. You can't sell that business. It's not worth anything.
Lining. The Amway Corporation, which does have some limited power to police its distributors, eventually terminated Leonard Hall's distributorship. Now, what happened in this case was apparently not the only time this kind of thing happened. I found cryptic references to something similar occurring in Hawaii about the same time. I'm not sure about that, I couldn't nail it down, but nevertheless, the attempts by the smaller fish distributors to leapfrog out of line and try to become tools kingpins themselves catches the attention of the Amway suits in Ada, Michigan. In late 1982, they commissioned a comprehensive internal study of the entire tools business. This is how we get one of the most extraordinary documents in the entire history of multi-level marketing, the Postma Memo. On January 10th, 1983, an Amway company lawyer named Ed Postma, head of Amway's Business Conduct Division, sent a memo to Patrick Sullivan, Amway's Director of Sales for the Northwest region. The subject of the memo was analysis of the Brit/Jaeger system. This memo proves the animosity that existed between the Amway Corporation and the Jaeger Tools organization. Postma says, quote, "It is their feeling," meaning the Jaeger people, "that no one at the
See, and then my dad, he had 6 car dealerships. My brother and I didn't. I was in the car business for a little bit, and my brother had no interest. And he sold his dealerships. Didn't matter. Like when some companies are saleable, and when I started my sign business, the first thing I did was I wanted to own a business. What type of business did I want to own and why? And it came down to I wanted to be business to business. I didn't want people to expect me to work crazy hours so I could be a dad. It had to be something that was somewhat consumable, and a few more, right? And I thought I was going to buy a small format print shop through Minuteman Press, which would have been like 5 times more expensive than what I ended up spending, with less capabilities. And so I knew the parameters. And so I found the industries, telecommunications, merchant processing, insurance, web stuff, IT, and marketing. And that was my background. So helping businesses do marketing and helping them create marketing plans that they would then have me produce was something I could offer.
Company completely relates to their efforts in attempting to build the business and the organization.
Yes.
There is a constant feeling of competition with the corporation. The memo,
like, it is that long-term muscle of, like, the thought process of, if I spend this money now, I won't have it later. In fact, I finished kindergarten, first grade, and second grade for the most part of like the real outline, like the first draft of the real outline for the K through 12 financial education program. And already it's teaching them saving, teaching them goal setting, giving them a target and a goal and a time frame and a means. Like, it's almost like setting up like a budget and a savings plan for a first grader. But you're not teaching them what it is, you're teaching them the muscle. When I ran a T-ball league, parents would be like, who won? I'm like, the kids, and you, hopefully, like, they're enjoying it. 8 people ran after the ball. Did you see how much fun they were having? They swung a baseball bat, they threw a ball, they ran around a little bit, and they wore the uniform. Like, isn't that the first step?
Memo contains several smoking gun phrases, such as this, quote, "In the words of one Diamond from the Northwest, the corporation should manufacture products and get out of the way. This sums up the extent of the relationship that these diamonds wish to have with the company. It has been my judgment, on observations, that they do not do a better meeting than we do, nor can they provide the same type of motivation as we do. However, in attempting to convince the corporation to stay out of the motivation business, it allows them to do 2 things. First, it further isolates the business. Second, it allows them to operate a motivation business with little or no competition," end quote. Now, what Postma is referring to here, the same type of motivation we do, is the Amway Corporation's own very small library of motivational tape.
So, people in chat don't understand that, right, Missy? But here's how I did it. If you wanted to make X amount of money in real estate or anything else, and this was a Zig Ziglar thing I learned, and probably brought Bob Proctor, where if you and I were going to have a sales contest to see who could sell more of something, and you were a better salesperson than I was, and you, out of every 10 people you sold to, or you talked to, you sold 3, and I only sold 1. Well, I know if I talk to at least 3 times more people than you do, I mathematically should sell more than you do. So the way I taught it to realtors was, you have an average price in this market. If we made up the percentages and then you figured it out based on your activity, but if we said every 10 times you contacted a for sale by owner, 1 of them let you in. And out of every 3 for sale by owners that let you in, 1 of them ends up listing with you. So you need to call 30 to get into 3 to sell 1. So now, if I know every 10 or every, I got to call 30 for 1, now I can just do the math of how many calls I have to make to get how many appointments I need to convert X number into transactions. Then I can adjust my activity level based on the ratios that I can calculate after I've done the activity long enough. Measure, monitor, adjust, and control. But if you know where you want to be 3 years from now, and you know the activities it's going to take to get there, then you can break it down to the day. If I do this activity every day and I do that for this week, I hit my weekly goal. And if I do that 4 times, I hit my monthly goal. And if I do that 12 times, I hit my yearly goal. And you literally take the future that you want, you break it down into the ridiculous today. Like how I could turn $20 a month, which was like an extra $2,000 for the car or whatever. I could do that by convincing you, if you just don't order a 3-topping pizza twice a month, then you can have the car. If your husband would just stop smoking a pack and a half a day and go down to a half a pack, you can afford the car. So do you want the car or the cigarettes? Well, obviously I want the car more than the cigarettes. Okay, done deal. Like, you're reducing things to the most ridiculous way to handle it, to put it into a perspective that you can deal with. So when you turn making $1 million in real estate into how many calls and presentations do I have to do, it's eating an elephant one bite at a time.
They did put out tapes and books occasionally, but their motivational operation was dwarfed by the Jaeger Brit tools operation. Postma continues, quote, "It becomes clear that although they, the Jaeger Diamonds, realize that they are Amway distributors, they consider their personal business to be the motivation tools business. I think there is little question that this is where the big money is made. The motivation business is also where their primary allegiance lies," end quote. There are numerous other gems from this memo. For instance, Postma dissects the rallies on which he...
I'm sure you can still get flavors.
...estimates Jaeger rakes in 20...
You know what I started with now, right? I just started these. It's green, that's why it looks see-through. They're coffee pouches. Like chew tobacco, but coffee grinds with caffeine. So I've noticed I smoke less with them.
$25,000 or $50,000 for a weekend, or $250,000 for free enterprise days. Postma also documents how there are vendors present at these rallies who rent jewelry, flashy clothes, and cars for diamond distributors to use at rallies to appear successful. This is a flat-out admission that the higher pins in Amway don't make the kind of money that they claim to make, and it's another layer of grift. The kingpins are making more money on renting swag.
Oh no, you can definitely get flavored THC, that's for sure.
To distributors to make them appear rich. Incidentally, this also corroborates the main thesis of Phil Kern's book, Fake It Till You Make It, that's what that phrase means, and also corroborates similar claims made later in the 1990s and 2000s by Eric Scheibler.
So the fake it till you make it gets people broke as hell, because they say you're definitely going to be rich, so start living like it. And it's like, if I can put you into debt, you'll be more loyal because you got to get out of it. It's like a gambler's mentality.
Ruth Carter. Postma also says, direct quote, "The tool business is illegal. Although the Amway business is legal, the tools business is not. It is a pyramid," end quote. I don't know how much more comprehensive you get than that.
I don't know if it still works that way, but I bet it would. I almost guarantee if you took 40 resumes around today, you'd get a job. Even though everybody says you do it online, you this, you that.
This is the Amway Corporation declaring the tools cult an illegal pyramid scheme. The Postma memo was not the only internal expose of the tools cult. Slightly earlier, sometime in 1982, there was a document titled The Challenge of the 80s, which warned the Amway Policy Committee that the illegality of the tools business threatened the very existence of the Amway Corporation itself. In other words, they feared the FTC renewing the battle against them, a prospect which scared the hell out of the Amway suits since they couldn't control the behavior of the tools kingpins. I also found a reference to a warning issued by a federal district court in Ohio to the Amway Corporation, titled Amway Distributor Compliance with the Code of Ethics and Rules of Conduct. Now, I couldn't find a copy of the original document itself, but another source that quoted it claimed that it said this, quote, "Widespread illegalities inherent in Amway distributor-designed systems of tapes, books, and rallies. While most of these systems were conceived in the late 1960s and early 1970s as genuine support programs, entrepreneurial higher pins discovered and developed programs for substantial, separate, additional income under the Amway umbrella," end quote. The hits kept coming for Amway. In early 1983, the news show 60 Minutes does an expose on Amway called Soap and Hope. Now, this is mostly about whether the income promises match up with reality, and it's also tangentially about the tools cult. In this show, Mike Wallace interviews Dexter Yeager and his wife, Birdie. Surprisingly, Wallace goes fairly easy on them and does not press the main issue, which is whether his income is from the tools business or the Amway business, a question which 60 Minutes leaves open-ended. Still, the 60 Minutes segment, and particularly the Leonard Hall debacle, evidently spook the Amway suits enough that they finally decide to take action. In January 1983, right after the Postma memo, founders Rich DeVos and Jay Van Andel put out 2 of their own tapes called Directly Speaking. They are messages basically to the tools kingpins, the diamonds, generally.
This dude does amazing videos. He has one on the Costco one. They're so well sourced and researched, like, other than stuff outside that's like personal ancillary stuff, fuck, I can't do it. Like, I can't better educate you than what he's doing.
Yeager organization, particularly. In these tapes, the Amway suits warn the tools kingpins about going too far with the tools business.
I'm not sold on the aesthetic, though.
That it could call down the thunder on the whole Amway ecosystem. This is not explicitly stated, but it's probably what they mean, causing the FTC to renew the war against them. The Amway founders warn the kingpins about what's euphemistically called the curiosity approach, which is how they bait and switch people into prospecting meetings by not telling them that they're signing up for Amway. But the big bombshell is this. Indirectly speaking, the suits announced that they're going to start counting Amway-approved tapes toward distributors' bonuses. What the Diamonds take this to mean is that Amway is going to begin stepping up the business of its own tools to compete with the kingpin's tool businesses. This is nothing less than a declaration of war. Amway execs go coast to coast.
Think about this. They're symbiotic businesses, and vertical integration is war.
Visiting the kingpins who rage at them in meeting after meeting about how the corporation is trying to kill their business. The Amway suits' response is, no, you don't understand. What you're doing is illegal, and if the FTC or the courts get involved, they could destroy everything. There was apparently a big meeting in Hawaii to this effect, which is mentioned peripherally in various sources, including the Miami tape, but if a similar record of this meeting existed, it has unfortunately been lost to history. Things finally come to a head at another fateful meeting between Amway corporate representatives and the tools kingpins. This meeting, a remarkable document of which has been preserved, is the climax of our story, the Miami Showdown. Miami Beach's Fontainebleau Hotel, pronounced by the locals as Fountainbleu, is a famous local landmark. It was opened in 1955, was the site of a TV special with Frank Sinatra welcoming Elvis back from his tour in the Army, and was even featured in a James Bond movie. On April 5th, 1983, a Tuesday, Amway representatives, including Ron Lindebaum, director of sales for the Western region, and Bob Abraham, an Amway company lawyer, met with a group of tools kingpins on an outdoor terrace of this hotel. Among the kingpins in attendance were Jerry Herrera, who controlled much of the tools business in Puerto Rico, Ron Hale, who was directly downline of Dexter Yeager, Doug Weed,
there will be no H-bomber hit piece on this guy.
Of course, and Dexter Yeager and his wife, Birdie. It's unclear how many people were there. A roster of attendees
would... Rumble, I'd be interested in finding out if there's any crossover from... what's his name? Douglas and McKibben and those types with these types.
Would be a very valuable thing, but I haven't found it. The ostensible purpose of the meeting was for the Amway corporate representatives to explain, or try to explain, to the tools kingpins the legal danger that they were putting themselves and the whole Amway ecosystem in by profiting so egregiously from the tools cult. An ulterior motive may have been an entree by the Amway Corporation to try to find a way to share in the profits from that business. Certainly, the kingpins perceived that that's what the suits were trying to do. This extraordinary meeting was caught on tape. Though no longer available on the live web, an early blogger critical of Amway posted the recordings on his website back in the 2000s, and most, but not all, of those recordings are still available on archive.org. This tape is, in my opinion, the most illuminating historical source we have about how MLMs work from the top down. To my knowledge, no other source like this exists. It's the equivalent of having a tape recording of a meeting of high-level mafia bosses discussing big strategy. Because there's a cone of silence around the top levels of MLMs, and because in Amway particularly, they tend to be family businesses where no one talks and no one ever leaves, we have almost no other sources about how these things really work at this very high level. The tape of the Miami Showdown is raw and unedited. You can hear airplanes going by overhead, for instance. The meeting is acrimonious, particularly at the beginning. A bunch of people are shouting at each other. This is proof positive of the animosity between the ownership and policy heads of the two pyramids, the ostensibly legal Amway business and the legally untested tools cult business. I'm going to play for you some of the most important bits.
I'm sensitive to it. They created two wars. I'm sensitive. That's why it looks like a smoke screen, because we get around it now after the fact. Because he said the BV was never meant to be competitive, and on the last directly speaking tape, he says hopefully that'll create some competition.
BV, business volume. Often BV stands for business volume, which is how the overrides and pay scales work.
Important bits.
I'm sensitive to it. They created two wars. I'm sensitive. That's why it looks like a smoke screen, because we get around it now after the fact. Because he said the BV was never meant to be competitive, and on the last directly speaking tape, he says hopefully that'll create some competition. And so he's contradicting himself. So the corporation still tell us that these new rules, BV on tape, is not going to take away from your tape business. If someone else comes out here, you're the same person. They consistently.
Yeah, BV on tapes, business volume on tapes, to disincentivize their own tapes, because the distributor downline, if they resell the non-Amway tape, they get nothing. But if they resell the Amway tape, they get towards override. Also, it keeps it from being an illegal pyramid.
Legal problem. That's why we got to take your tape business away. We do have a legal problem, but we don't think it's going to take your tape business away or any other business.
There he goes. He just said it.
Because he said the BV was never meant to be competitive, and on the last directly speaking tape, he says hopefully that'll create some competition. And so he's contradicting himself. So Ron, people, the corporation still tell us that these new rules, TV on tape, is not going to take away from your tape business. If someone else comes here, you're the same person, and consistently says, we got a legal problem, that's why we got to take your tape business away.
We got a legal problem.
We do have a legal problem, but we don't think it's going to take your tape business away or any other business. We do have a legal problem, but we don't think it's going to take your tape business away or any other business.
What you just heard are admissions that the Amway Corporation knew that most of the money was being made in the tools business. Doug Weed referred to BV on tapes. BV is an Amway term meaning business volume. It's part of how they calculate bonuses. But that reference refers to the kingpin's fears that Amway is trying to get into the motivational tools business and squeeze the kingpins out.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. This is what he's separating is Amway, that was the business of selling household products, and the cult of Amway, which is the business of training and personal motivation. And this training and personal motivation was separate from MLMs, but became co-joined. And that's where you have that it's like a religious revival more than it is a business.
Here's some more.
What I'm hearing you say is the decision was made to start to reap some of the rewards of the tape business. I just got to say that is not, tell you that is not why the decision was made to put BB on tapes.
Here's the response from an unidentified kingpin.
Well, if it doesn't work, why split the company over? Either it's work and you'll get our tape business. The guy in the sunglasses is going to clarify some of that.
And this is the true smoking gun, the statement that proves that most of the Amway Corporation's profits are a result, indirectly, of the tools business.
Ron, can I say something here? And I think that Doug and Jerry just said here with the tape business. The fact, the reason Amway is for 1.5 billion, and the reason it's going to go to 2.5 billion, when I got into Amway, it was 200 million. One of the biggest reasons it went from 200 million to 1.5 billion was seminars and with all the things in the Amway business, with seminars and rallies, with tapes and so on that were voluntarily purchased and voluntarily going to by distributors. And all of a sudden right now we perceive the company strong, whether it's Rich and Jay or whether the company as a whole, strongly coming down on these things. And like somebody said here, is Rich really shooting for 1.5 or 2.5 billion or 2.5 billion? We're somewhat confused. And because he really realized that it wasn't just the quality of the FAA with this business. And you and I are talking about this. FAA is a great product. But there's LLC is a great product. But it's not going to stand alone. I got your person. I got you. And this is what's coming out. As much money as we can get for through the tape system, we wouldn't have to. The money would be there to build it for the incentive to build no money.
As much money as we can get through the tape business. There'd be an incentive there to build it, but there's no money. Then there's this exchange between Doug Weed, Yeager's protege, and Amway's lawyer, Bob Abraham.
Would it be illegal to put more money in the plan? No.
Put more money in the plan? Not smart enough. You have some kind of a hooker in that car? You think Amway put more money in the plan?
The suggestion to put more money in the plan means, is it possible for the Amway Corporation to tinker with its system, its pyramid-shaped structure, to make the actual selling of products and recruitment more profitable so that the kingpins wouldn't have to get rich selling books, tapes, and seminar tickets? But we know that can't happen, because if Amway tinkers with their business plan, it runs the risk of crossing the very fine red lines that the FTC drew around it in that 1979 decision, which is the only thing that keeps the whole business technically legal. So what's the fix? Ron Lindenbaum, one of the Amway suits, said,
no, the plan. The plan is what is referred to as the business plan, like how the upline works, how the overrides work, what levels are this. And all MLMs have their version of a plan. Did you show them the plan? How many times a week are you going to show the plan? It's a vernacular for present the business opportunity.
Says this, a directive that has clearly come from the lawyers and is based on the FTC decision.
Be sure to ensure that tools do not grow to such a level that they can no longer be described as reasonably related to the sale of the product to the ultimate consumer. What's reasonable? I don't, there's a whole bunch of parts to it here.
Why is this important? Because if the kingpins are making money from something other than the sale of products to end consumers, then they are involved in an illegal pyramid scheme. The FTC could renew its assault by claiming that Amway has violated the terms of that 1979 decision, and the whole enterprise could go the way of Costco Interplanetary and Holiday Magic. This is what the Amway suits are afraid of. Late in the meeting, Amway's lawyer, Bob Abraham, stresses this point, but he also seizes the opportunity to make a political statement, which shows how the Amway Corporation and the kingpins view themselves in a societal context.
Nice. In this situation you can't give up your income because you didn't meet Chapter 13 or bankruptcy court. How do we satisfy Amway's desires and demands? Because they're running scared. And they are running scared. They're running scared because they're confronted with the enemy, and the enemy happens to be the liberals of this country at the moment. So they're on. And those liberals are out there to try to find any little nitpicking thing they can find. And they are running scared. How do we satisfy Amway?
So, who are these conservative, grifting, powerful, evangelical people mad at? The bureaucracy that regulates on behalf of consumers. Like, consumers are their enemies, and regulating them and making it harder for them to anti-Robin Hood, the enemies become the liberals, the Democrats. Like, this enemies thing isn't new. This idea that Republicans will save them from the enemy that want to regulate pollution and consumer protection and fair housing and all the evil stuff that destroys the country.
Desires and demands. Because they're running scared. And they are running scared. They're running scared because they're confronted with the enemy, and the enemy happens to be the liberals of this country at the moment. So they're on. And those liberals are out there to try to find any little nitpicking thing they can find to make you look like what you've always befriended. It's a pyramid, unlawful pyramid.
They're the all-powerful, brilliant victims. They're the victims of the liberals. Like, this is all, the persecution complex is both real and a tool.
Wholesale buying club.
Throughout the Miami Showdown meeting, Dexter Yeager is uncharacteristically quiet. His wife Birdie speaks up more often than he does. But after a while, he does finally chime in with how he sees the situation. Here's that.
I think we're all right in the middle. The corporation's over here, and we're over here, and we feel that we got something ready to go, and we can work it out, we can smooth it out, we'll do whatever it takes to make it happen, as long as we can get back to having some kind of a love relationship and a mutual respect. And that seems to have been thrown aside by both sides, and we're almost acting like rejected lovers.
The end of the meeting is cordial.
I'll bet you that's what a Freedom Caucus meeting sounds like.
Kingpins praise and thank the Amway suits for coming. They promise they'll work together, kumbaya, and all of that. It reminds me a bit of the gangsters embracing each other at the end of the summit meeting in The Godfather. There was another meeting later that same day at the same hotel, a much more scripted meeting. It was in a hotel ballroom, and it was between the Amway suits and the lower level tools called participants, called the Emeralds. There are far fewer juicy revelations on that tape, probably because that group operated at a lower level, and in any event, that tape is unfortunately incomplete. So what, if anything, was accomplished at the Miami Showdown? Unfortunately, we don't know. The only way we know about the showdown itself was because this tape managed to surface back in the early 2000s. There must have been other meetings, other damning memos, but we haven't seen or heard of any of them. As I said early on, these organizations are as secretive as the mafia, with a cone of silence surrounding nearly everything they do. All we do know is the ultimate result of the battle between the Amway Corporation and the tools called Kingpins. The corporation surrendered. That's the subject of the next chapter. 1988. Climate scientist Dr. James Hansen testifies before Congress.
Why does my guy look like Steve Buscemi?
That human-caused global warming is an advancing threat. Tom Cruise shakes up movie screens in Cocktail. Metallica puts out its And Justice for All album. George Bush I is elected president with the generous help of Doug Weed and numerous Amway distributors. And Amway co-founder Rich DeVos goes to court and makes a startling...
I mean, the Amway co-founder's kid was the head of the Department of Education and is a billionaire.
admission on the witness stand. By the late 1980s, lawsuits against Amway and the tools called Kingpins were beginning to...
I mean, these radical Seven Mountain motherfuckers, Calvinists or whatever they are. I mean, they've been trying to become the ruling class of society.
Pile up. Most were filed by Amway distributors who sued their former uplines to try to get into the tools called business, to break into that walled garden, in other words. Some lawsuits...
I've always been conflicted with Metallica because of the Napster thing.
were from former distributors who felt they'd been cheated by the kingpins in one way or another, or who blamed the Amway Corporation for not reining them in. DeVos testified in one of these cases. From the sources, it's unclear exactly which one. But here is the Q&A from that proceeding. Question: what happened in the area of the tools abuses, the private tools abuses addressed at that meeting? By that meeting, the lawyer is referring specifically to the Miami showdown. DeVos: well, those abuses continue to this day. There are a variety of people who complain to me continually about some of those abuses, so that's an ongoing challenge that the organization faces. I said to some of our staff there that I thought it would cost us a few $100 million in volume. I think I said 300 million as we went through a correction phase. I think we lost upwards of 300 million in volume as we tried to go through this adjustment period. Question: it is a position that you took in the early part of 1983. Have you deviated from that position in the Amway Corporation since then, with respect to your 10 points and the subject matter contained therein? DeVos's answer: well, let's just say that we dealt with it the way we did. We did put some people under notice that they were doing things wrong. We pursued, of course, re-education, but we never
We pursued of a core, it's probably a core, we pursued, of course, re-education, but we never pursued it to its ultimate goal of really nailing anything down. Re-education, you say, huh?
Pursued it to its ultimate goal of really nailing anything down. In the meantime, the volume came down, and we started to work at trying to hold the business together, but the problem persisted in any case. End quote. This is all we really know about Amway's surrender. But if you zoom out at a macro level, the dynamics of the decision is clear. The Amway Corporation realized that a significant portion of their income came from the downlines of the tools kingpins, all of those distributors hooked on tapes and rallies, faithfully buying LOC and SA8 soap. Revenues were already declining in 1982 and 1983. Amway provoked a conflict with the kingpins, who thought that the company was trying to horn in on the tools cult business. Faced with a backlash at the Miami showdown, a decision was made at the highest level to back off, maybe to issue a few warnings here and there, but not really to follow through with them. After all, the company was already bleeding $200 to $300 million from what little they did try to do. Evidently, the suits decided that they couldn't risk heavier losses. And what about the FTC, that sword of Damocles that hung forever over this entire ecosystem of grift? Amway apparently decided that they simply had to hope for the best, hope that the FTC wouldn't renew the assault and go after the pyramid scheme run by the kingpins. This gamble was probably reasonable when it was made in 1983, and certainly proved so over the succeeding decades. As both the Amway Corporation and the tools cult kingpins increased their wealth and their political power, they were able to not only insulate themselves pretty effectively from another assault by the government, but they were also able to advance the broader political and...
An assault by the government? You mean regulatory agencies basically enforcing terms of service?
Ideological project that the entire Amway universe was, at least in part, created to build. We're almost finished, but we do have to turn to that story next, before we conclude. We've already observed the political nature of the Amway enterprise. Almost without exception, Amway distributors are, and have historically been, conservative Republicans. I profiled Doug Weed, tools cult kingpin and pipeline from the religious right to the Bush family, in Chapter 6. In addition to him, it's worth exploring briefly the ties between the tools cult and the broader project, afoot beginning in the 1970s, to turn America's politics sharply to the right, and to entrench and broaden the power of evangelical Christians in particular. Dexter Yeager was a member of an organization called the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship International, FGBMFI. This was a hard Christian right organization based in the Pentecostal evangelical movement that expanded throughout the South in the 1950s and essentially built the ideology that we now call prosperity gospel. Others in this same organization were connected.
I didn't get to the end. I didn't get here. I didn't get here. Okay, I see you.
To it included Oral Roberts, the Osteen family, including today's Joel Osteen, and televangelist Jim Bakker, who became a close friend of Dexter Yeager. In fact, Yeager was something of a mentor to Bakker, who began to incorporate the style and messaging of the Amway motivational tools into his own efforts to spread politically conservative, capitalist-oriented Christian gospel, particularly through the medium of television. In the mid-1970s, after his falling out with Pat Robertson's Christian Broadcasting Network in California, Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where they founded the televangelist PTL
which
ministry.
organization? The Americanism one, or?
One of the factors that drew them there was Yeager's presence in the Charlotte community. Yeager himself later sat on the board of PTL. A historian who studied Bakker's life and career analyzed the television.
Well, so I also listened to a very interesting story about the Bakkers, Tammy Faye and what Jim Bakker, and they were like innovators of prosperity grifting.
Evangelist's relationship with Dexter Yeager like this, quote, Baker was especially interested to learn how to apply Yeager's inspirational messages and techniques to his own ministry. In fact, he was so enthralled with Yeager that he became an Amway sales associate and attended weekly meetings with Yeager, Doug Weed, and other important members of the Amway organization. These meetings and the connections with Amway and with Yeager inspired Baker to make prosperity theology an even more important part of his ministry, and he began to learn from Yeager how to market and sell his message. Yeager, meanwhile, endorsed PTL and encouraged his distributors to support.
He was originally on like CBN, I think, as CBN was dying, and there's like some story about a fundraiser where they needed to raise 40 grand, and this miracle worker went out there and somehow got it done, and he just was like a master at marketing and manipulation.
Support Baker's new network. He also liked to flaunt his own success with PTL employees by walking around the offices with a shoulder satchel containing $20,000 of, quote, pocket money, end quote. PTL and Jim and Tammy Faye were part of a larger movement that grew in the mid-1970s. This movement, in which politically conservative evangelicals were prominent, was a backlash to the cultural and economic liberalism of the 1960s. LBJ's Great Society, the protests against the Vietnam War, and particularly the phenomenon of second-wave feminism and the LGBTQ liberation movement. This counter-reaction would manifest itself later in the decade with the foundation of the Moral Majority, Jerry Falwell's political action organization.
Now, you see how close this all ends up. Like, these radicals, anti-government, are entrenched in the government. And it is this ongoing I mean, they're like Ron Swanson as a political party. Their entire goal is to manipulate the public so that they can get elected, so that they can deregulate stuff and take money from poor people. And then they can blame that your life sucks on the Democrats and say, we just want to make you free. They're making you broke. So that's why you got to elect us, so that they can get elected, so that they can make laws to deregulate. And they're deregulating because they're like scorned at dealing with regulations.
This galvanizing of the Christian right wing was instrumental in propelling.
This is the same with the tobacco companies, the Sackler family, the oil companies, and their lies about climate change, Boeing. This is still the ongoing project of big money, rich people being part of and tied to the Republican movement of deregulation so that the rich people can get more money, and that any poor people that are getting government money, they don't deserve it because they're not rich like us getting government money.
Ronald Reagan to the White House in 1980. Seeing it all in context, doesn't it make sense that Doug Weed, another of Dexter Yeager's proteges, wrote Reagan's campaign biography? It makes sense, doesn't it, that Reagan spoke at an Amway convention organized by Dexter Yeager. The Tools cult was not just a way to make vast amounts of money, though clearly it was that. It was also a political and ideological project to remake America. There's an environmental component to this too. Part of the new consciousness that developed in the 1970s involved an understanding that America had limits, ecological and environmental limits to consumption.
I mean, if you understand what Trump's goals are, what he wants to accomplish, and the typical tools he uses, it all becomes real simple and easy to see. But when the media is like, well, Trump said he wants to be a dictator. Do you think he actually wants to be a dictator? Like, the guy says things and then he does them. He just led a coup. Now he tells you he wants to be a dictator, and you're like, does he really mean it?
Pollution, and ultimately to profits. To true believers in the ideology of capitalism, any hint of limits, ecological or otherwise, are absolutely unacceptable. Part of the core beliefs of the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship International, the organization to which Dexter Yeager and Jim Baker belonged, was...
Now, how similar to, what's his fucking name? Douglas? And how similar to AIM and AFI is this? One's product is fear of the left and also mysticism for personal gain. These people, this is mysticism for personal gain. Selling the tapes and the MLM is mysticism for personal gain. And their enemy is the government that wants them to stop ripping people off.
That the American dream was embodied by economic growth and personal prosperity, and also that these things were core tenets of Christianity. So the dreams promised by the Tools cult really were the point. It really was about the coach, the boat, the mansion, and the fur coats, the stuff that Amway believers were instructed to cut out pictures of and paste on their refrigerators.
A dream board. Make a dream board.
Remind themselves daily of what they'd have on that magical day that they go diamond. Fused together with the politics and the theology of prosperity gospel, Amway itself becomes something righteous and holy, and anyone outside the cult is an enemy. Consider again what Amway lawyer Bob Abrahams said during the Miami showdown.
They run scared because they're confronted with the enemy, and the enemy happens to be the liberals of this country at the moment. So they're not.
It wasn't just politics and economics, though. As the hold of the Christian right wing over America tightened in the 1980s and 90s, homophobia became one of the major characteristics of their movement and a major policy plank of the Republican Party. After 1991, there was no more Soviet Union, and the specter of
no more normal RNC. These people have taken over. Like, Mike Johnson is one of these people. The Federalist judges are these people. Like, they have taken over.
Global communism was no longer available as a punching bag and a unifying threat for the conservative right. Some gay leaders argue that hatred of the LGBTQ community began to replace anti-communism.
Exactly. Like, these people need an enemy to point you away from them robbing you.
As the galvanizing ideology within the American conservative movement, more powerful even than their powerful opposition to abortion rights. It should come as no surprise that on the many thousands of hours of tapes that exist of Dexter Yeager extemporizing, particularly at those supercharged Amway rallies and packed stadiums, there are homophobic statements from him condemning the LGBTQ community and criticizing the so-called gay lifestyle. Yeager's attacks on the LGBTQ community had a political component too. In the 1990s, he attacked Hillary Clinton, a favorite target of the right wing, as a lesbian, and charged that the Secret Service brought her lesbian lovers into the White House, a story that he told to
They are way more willing to challenge Biden's age and gaffes. They're more willing to do that than they are to challenge Trump. That they are to challenge the Republicans even more. Because every time they mention, like, Georgia, they call it a Trump trial. It's not a fucking Trump trial. It's a RICO trial with other co-conspirators. Like, you're not this mastermind sitting there like a puppet master. And they make it like he's the only one that did something wrong with the election denial, and the Republicans will wise up. This is the fucking liberal problem. I know I'm right, so you'll wise up. And then they ask fucking close-ended questions like, do you really believe the election was stolen? Which gives them free reign to not answer the question and say whatever the fuck they want.
5,000 Amway distributors of the Fred Hartice organization, itself a spin-off of Yeager's line. Because, of course, being a Democrat and being a lesbian were
Yeah, you had 3 Trump attorneys plead guilty, and it's the Trump RICO trial.
Comparable sins in the politicized Christian.
Just like the New York trial is an election interference trial, not the hush money trial. That'd be like saying Jeffrey Epstein is the airplane trial.
Worldview of the Amway Tools cult. In March 1987,
it's a real estate island trial.
Jim Baker was brought down as head of the PTL ministry in a series of scandals in which he was accused of diverting funds from his ministry to pay blackmail money to his mistress, Jessica Hahn. When the story broke, Baker went into hiding to avoid the press and also his aggrieved wife, Tammy Faye. Where exactly did he go to hide? To a guest house on Dexter Yeager's estate. Jim Baker eventually went to prison for fraud and conspiracy. Curiously, despite Baker's closeness to him, Dexter Yeager does not appear as a character in the 2021 film The Eyes of Tammy Faye, which dramatizes the Bakers' lives and careers.
All right, wrap it up.
Most of the major participants in our story are gone now. Bill Britt, first to mass-produce Tools cult tapes, died in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida in January 2013. In the latter part of his career, he concentrated heavily on building Amway downlines and spreading the Tools cult to India. He seems to have had a falling out with Dexter Yeager at some point, but I didn't spend much time researching that. Doug Weed, who documented the birth of the Tools cult and certainly profited from it, passed away in December 2021. Jay Van Andel, co-founder of Amway Corporation, died in December 2004. His partner Rich DeVos passed away in September 2018. The master kingpin himself, Dexter Yeager, died peacefully at his home in Charlotte, North Carolina on January 6, 2019. There are numerous tributes to him on the web, many from obvious acolytes of the Tools cult, who still speak of him effusively and parrot the bromides that he spent decades delivering. The Tools cult continues on to this day. It remains a major focus of the criticism directed at the Amway phenomenon as a whole, particularly from the anti-MLM movement. The legality of the Tools...
That's why they want a right-wing billionaire to get TikTok.
Business remains officially untested by the FTC or federal courts. The advance of the broader political and social project of the Amway universe and the increasing share of the American economy that's tied up in ever-multiplying MLM grifts leaves me skeptical that there will ever be any meaningful official action to disrupt these organizations. Historically, in my opinion, there needs to be a lot more attention paid to this story, which I believe lies at the heart of the history of American business, economics, and politics in the past 60 years. In my view, the fact that Dexter Yeager, love him or hate him, is not recognized as one of the most important and influential people in recent American history is astonishing. But if you've gone this far into the video, you now know more about him than most people do. There is a much shorter companion piece to this video in which I briefly explain how I made it, where I think the story fits in the broader anti-MLM sphere, and some tidbits that didn't make the final cut. So if you're interested, please check that one out. If you like what I do, the best way to help me is to watch another one of my videos. I've done several on the histories of shit.
Go support, like, sub, dono. Oh, I didn't sub. Dono. These videos are so thorough. They're so good. Oh, let's see. Fourth Crusade, Scott, Forgotten Election of 24. I mean, these are really well. These are crazy. History of urban poop. That's pretty funny. Yeah, he's really good. So this was fun. Tomorrow we have Murder Mondays. We're going to be discussing suspects and maybe making an interactive list during stream. So it should be fun. I think it's for like 1 o'clock tomorrow. Go enjoy your weekend. And yeah, hopefully see you tomorrow. Take it easy, guys.